about to begin with some opening administrative comments. What conference wouldn't be correct without second day changes? For our first program change, General Jameson's 11 o'clock keynote is now at 12 o'clock. We are swapping that speech with lunch. We are updating the boards, the website, and the app to reflect. And also, Mr. Marion's GS15 mentoring session, which was at 12:30, is now going to be at 11:30. So we've had a couple of changes. Again, please check the app. It will be the most update. The website will be the most update, and we're going to get some arts and crafts on our big boards to make those pen and ink changes. The AFITC 2019 commemorative coin. They are available for sale out in the main hallway. The cost is $10. They were going very, very fast yesterday, so hopefully you can pick one up today. If you've missed any of the presentations from the IMPAC or the Alabama Ballrooms D and E, you can visit the Air University YouTube channel to watch the full presentations. Anything that happened in D and E and the IMPAC has been recorded and is available on the AU YouTube website. For any items you may have lost, I know there is a young female airman who lost her cap in here yesterday. I have the cap, but not the airman. That lost and found section is the registration desk on the Bibb Street entrance of this facility. So maybe where you came in on the Bibb Street entrance to register. That's where lost and found is. Again, the most updated information regarding breakout sessions, senior lectures, and all things related to AFITC are on the app and the website. If you missed it yesterday, the Kessel Run brief will be delivered again today right here at 1 o'clock in the IMPAC. We had to turn people away because the room was overflowing with folks. That's good. And this afternoon's keynote at 2 will be a software factory collider panel, again in the website. Hear how the tech ninjas from Kessel Run, Space Camp, Bespin, Level Up, and Cloud One have pioneered the development and security operation landscape and how they are working together to take software development to the next level. Okay, that concludes all the admin notes. We'll turn you over to your normally scheduled program. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Bosco. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now introduce our first keynote speaker this morning, Mr. Bill Marion. Mr. Bill Marion is Deputy Chief Information Dominance and Air Force Deputy Chief Information Officer. Mr. Marion assists in leading 3 directorates and supports 54,000 cyber operations and support personnel across the globe with a portfolio valued at $17 billion. He provides oversight of the Air Force's information technology portfolio, including the information technology investment strategy, networks and network-centric policies, communications, information resources management, information assurance, and related matters for the Department of the Air Force. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Marion.
All right, good morning. How's everybody doing? It is not 100 degrees in Montgomery, Alabama, so it doesn't get any better than this. Thanks again for the invite. Been co-chairing this for a while, and this is the reason we do it right here. This is where the teaming and collaboration to take the Air Force to through the next century really starts. And so thank you all for coming out today. I've got a couple slides that we're going to go through today. I hopefully have enough time for question and answers. As we talked through this time last year, we were talking about a reorg that has been completed, right? You have an A26 and you have a CIO that's laser focused on our respective mission areas of integrated cyber and ISR. And in our portfolio on the CIO side, delivering the network we need and building cybersecurity that works for our airmen. That's what we're laser focused on, and that's what I'm going to talk to you today about. Let's go and get the slides. So we talked a lot yesterday about the NDS and that macro strategy to task. So I'm not going to go through that today. I think General Holmes and General Skinner covered that well. I'm going to start a little bit more tactical this morning. I don't know if you recognize the C-17. It's a young captain at Nellis Air Force Base. It was a perfect picture. I got to sit in the jump seat. So at Apex a couple years ago, a year and a half ago. What's telling right in the upper right is this Souls 53. And why do you say that's important? Because that 53 souls rests on the IT that we deliver all the way down to the tactical level. So in that bottom right is electronic flight bag, a simple iPad with simple connectivity, right? That's how we fly a lot of our airframes today. So my theme today, I just recently spoke at AFITC on bringing the big sexy back in IT, but IT is every bit of multi-domain operations. It's every bit of the fight, and it's every bit of the digital Air Force we need to take ourselves forward into a near peer and a peer fight. And that's what we've got to do. And so whether it's a simple iPad, and many of you that were involved with this wasn't just a simple iPad, right? There's a lot behind this. It's our delivery of those capabilities day in and day out, from the network level all the way up to the AI level, that we have got to deliver for our United States Air Force. The little interesting thing on that picture is, if you heard me talk about, there's also a green extension cord that literally runs to the back of the airframe. There's no USB in the front of that airframe, but there is USB in the back, because heaven forbid if we thought about, putting USB ports in the front of the airframe when we built it years ago. My next chart here is a little bit of refresher from last year. If you remember, there was a video we played, which is really around the Unify and Unite IT. How do we bring together an enterprise of our size, a concerted, orchestrated event of a lot of different individuals and a lot of different talents, to be honest, right? And this was that crowdsourced orchestra that happened, and hopefully everybody remembers that. But we don't always have the time or the predisposition to make that massive plan, but we all bring the orchestra together every day, and that was kind of the theme last year. We had a couple commitments. Change the RMF process. Done. Cloud-based applications. There's 100 in the pipeline. We didn't get 100 done. But the fact that we have 100 in the pipeline now was a huge undertaking. An enterprise information sharing environment. You call that CHES, Cloud Hosted Enterprise Services. It's not just about an Office 365 deployment. It's about unifying the way we share information and we collaborate. Yes, it's instantiated in a tactical product, but it's about the larger ecosystem at whole. AI framework. There's a cross-functional team that is now active inside the Air Staff. We cross all the 2 letters, building out that plan. There's an MIT accelerator I'll talk to a little bit. Next gen EIS, or EIT as a service. Right, off and running. Hats off to lead command, hats off to the PEO, and hats off to the staff all around that has delivered what I would consider 5 large-scale acquisitions in less than a year. And I'll talk to here, getting to bang inside of 1 calendar year across those areas. So network as a service, in-user devices, on down the road. Now, what we didn't get the passing grade on is airman satisfaction, right? This readiness discussion that General Skinner talked about, and I'm sure General Holmes talked about as well. We've got a lot of work to do there. But again, the team is laser focused on working that one through the fiscal year. I talked to in the reorg, right? Focus is something that the Pentagon sometimes does not have. I will tell you, I am laser focused. If you've seen me speak, this is the same focus areas that I briefed about a year ago, and that I will continue to beat on, because this is our core competency and what we bring to the fight. As General Skinner said, I always say this, we need to build the network we need, not the network we funded. The network layer, and you'll see a clip here in a minute from the Chief of Staff. It is the highway that interconnects us. I would argue it's the high-speed rail that we have to build to interconnect us. We have to take that to a whole nother level on how we connect our airmen, wired and wirelessly. That network we need also composes the cloud layer. It composes that enterprise services layer, how we deliver end devices from mobile and tablet and endpoints that are traditional like laptops and desktops. It's delivering that whole orchestrated capability. And as I've talked to in a little bit, one of the key that I talk about in the Digital Air Force every day inside the Pentagon is we have a lot of eaches going on. But we've got to better orchestrate all of the pieces in alignment. And so later this week, actually tomorrow, we'll have our Digital Modernization Forum. We used to call that EIT Summit. But that is the orchestration of all those moving parts. Because honestly, I equate it back to an SOS run if you've ever been to SOS, right? You're graded on how fast the team gets to the endpoint together, not by how fast each individual component gets there. Right? AI without cloud, AI without a network, applications without a network, software development factories without cloud, all of those interrelationships are absolutely key, or else we all lose in the end because we don't bring the holistic capability together. And so delivering an orchestrated piece is what I'm really going to talk about. Cybersecurity that works. Going to dive into this deeper, right? But we have got to continue to manage risk better inside of our enterprise. There's still a lot of pieces in the middle. We're uplifting a lot of policy. You're going to see more in the software factory realm that I'll talk to you in a little bit. We have to continue to reform it to where it enables us to provide better security, enables our weapon systems to be more secure, not slows down the entire process for unknown reasons. We'll dive into that one. Vibrant and ready cyber airmen. It's an area we share with the A26, with General Jameson and I. She owns the officer and enlisted. General Kennedy here, right here in the front, owns the officer and enlisted on the functional area manager side of it. And I've got the civilian side, and we continue to orchestrate all the moving parts moving forward. I'll cover a pretty key initiative there in the end as well. And the last one that we don't normally talk about a lot is just recently it was approved by the Secretary that special access programs will also move under this umbrella underneath the CIO. And so I will have the unclassified collateral and the special access program all together underneath one PEO in General Schmidt, which is a huge move forward to orchestrate and leverage shared services across the domains. They're not always going to be the same, but the fact that we have one PEO thinking through a cloud strategy consistent from NIPR to our most highly classified systems is really key in delivering speed and better security in how we move forward. So we have a video from the chief. Hopefully this will play.
A second area of important work is how we leverage automation and artificial intelligence to assist coalition warfighting and information sharing. Together as airmen, as international airmen, we must drive a consistent demand signal to our industry teammates. We need to ask them, does what you're offering connect across the network? Does it share with allies and partners? And does it learn with artificial intelligence at the tactical edge? It is time for us to focus less on the truck and more on the highway.
All right. Does that make sense? Anybody interested that the Chief of Staff of the Air Force is talking about you as part of the fight? I hope you're not surprised, but it's great to be on the stage with him pushing that mantra across the Air Force. And so, again, on the HAF side, we typically talk about multi-domain operations. On the SAF side, we talk about digital Air Force, but I would contend they are one and the same. It's building the high-speed rails and the highways to interconnect our airmen from sensor all the way back to a logistician at the end of the flight line. It's delivering those cloud services end to end. And so again, as we go into the model here, it starts with operations. It always starts with operations, and it always ends with operations. But what's very important is that we can understand the moving parts and where you fit in to each one of those major initiatives. So if you look at this from a digital Air Force perspective, right, always contend this is the stack in the middle. We have to have digitally minded airmen. We have a lot of digital airmen. We don't have enough. That's a kind of a whole of government discussion. So what's the training, education, recruiting, assessment, all those kind of things that go into that? You move up, that's the layer that we principally own at the enterprise level, the enterprise infrastructure. The CDO, Aline Vadrine, treating data as a strategic asset to the Air Force. All the initiatives, they've got a booth here. We encourage you to go talk to them. They're making some great strides in bringing that data layer in. Then right above that, the business systems make this Air Force run. If we don't have fuel and trucks and logistics where we need it at the point of the fight, we have failed. Then your weapon systems, right? Your 22s, your 16s, all of those weapon systems and how we connect them, again, from sensor to shooter. The ISR layer that's laid into that. And then ultimately, You know, we rush to the AI discussion, and I think we've got senior leadership to understand that there's a parallel track of some use cases for AI, so we'll continue to do those things. But we've got to orchestrate these layers in the middle to bring a network that we know and trust will deliver the information to the edge, and that we can do the compute to enable AI. And so again, over on the right, you kind of see some of the lead players in application and software development. I skipped over that one, apologize. AQ and the CSO. How do we create a repeatable software factory? And so I very much urge you to hit the software collider, DevSecOps software collider this afternoon that Lauren Knossenberger is running. We are at a new era of synergy and I'll call great parallel activities to bring speed and capability. Also what it brings, shared infrastructure, shared services, reduced costs, improved data sharing, all of that gets baked in when we start normalizing the lower part of that stack, right? Using the same Cloud One ecosystem, leveraging the same identity management services, security services on down the line. Huge progress there. Ultimately, right, we have little gaps in here today. This diagram has a purpose. The intent, of course, with Digital Air Force is bring those where they're one coherent integration strategy that is normalized across all. We all have ownership to that, I would contend. Again, we all feel good when our own projects, go ahead, go a little bit faster. I'm probably just as guilty of that in my domain. But some projects have got to have the push. Some projects have got to slow down a little bit. And I don't mean stop, I mean just to better synchronize. And it's not going to be perfect, but it's got to be much more synchronized than it is today. We maximize our spend and we maximize our output when we do that. So what specifically on the CIO side, right? If you take our layers, again, that vibrant cyber airman and that core infrastructure piece that we're responsible for, and you start to break that out. I apologize. Could you go back one? I'm sorry. So first off, think in process, people, and technology, right? So at the top of this, we've hired a couple what I would consider brilliant HQEs, both in our house and outside our house. So Lauren Knossenberger, our Chief of Innovation, Mr. Colt Whittle, from a Chief Experience Officer perspective. We have Brethren and Nick Shalon on the software side, and Preston Dunlap on the Chief Architect for ABMS, Air Battle Management System. Those seniors are helping to bring a whole new level of orchestration, innovation to our Air Force in concert with all of you. They're not going off into a corner and dreaming this stuff up and saying, hey, they're out and about with you, driving and pulling and pushing all of the innovative solutions that are out there and driving them into this new age. Integrating with AFWorks and DIU and the Bespins, Kobayashi Marus, the Kessel Runs. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Wanda Jones-Heath, our CISO, who's really driving the next way we look at cybersecurity and how we manage risk, and her team. So it starts there. In the middle of it, if you ever heard me speak, I've never done, all the way back, if you remember the FCA Rocky Mountain, probably about 5-6 years ago, when General Hyten spoke to the Connect, Protect, Compute, Store, Enterprise Services in devices. I would argue it's just like the OSI model. It will probably never go away. What will change are the initiatives that drive us to the next world order. And so we'll cover a couple of these lines of efforts, but certainly ITaaS is the fundamental core to that whole movement. Network as a service, end-user devices as a service, enterprise services, think cloud-hosted enterprise services. I don't know how many times I say enterprise and services, but right, all of those orchestrated layers to drive a new experience level. What I would tell you, though, the most challenging when you talk about the user experience, the airman readiness, we're making huge progress in pieces we haven't totally stitched the end-to-end together. But what I would say is hang with us, right? Every piece is important. Not that one day we're going to come out and the cloud is going to burst in a good way and everything will be working superbly one night. But we have to keep knocking away at each one of the elements of in essence, the service catalog of IT capabilities that we deliver. Last but not least, I'll end with the people side of it. This is a whole of nation, a whole of government issue. And I'll talk to digital you, the digital me, the digital all of you both inside our career field and community, and also what we're doing, what we have to do, and what the chief and the secretary demands of us outside of our workforce. But a lot of work. If you go to the civilian session today, we'll have about what we're doing with recruiting and training. There's a My Purse message that just went out about direct hire authority, expedited hire authority. We talked about it a little bit last year. We're starting to use it. We're still not using it enough. And again, as I talked to you last year, we were about 1,200 vacancies on the Air Force out of 10,000, 11,000. We're now about 1,400. I hope next year I don't come back and we're 1,600, right? So please use those authorities. Please work with the career program to work those hiring actions. It's really easy to blame the personnel system. I know I've done it. But it's our engagement with that system where we have a lot of new authorities to go after talent, to hire talent, and to work with AFPC and the recruiting services. And I will tell you, they're out in events that would not necessarily boggle your mind, but you go, we're really doing that in cyber competitions and Black Hats and DEF CONs and different things. You saw a lot of the recent conference where AQ was there. We had a recruiting there. That's the work that we're doing now. It's no longer just go beat on a campus and see if you can get a recruit. They're actually spreading their wings out in many different ways, which is really helping out. Then ultimately, there's the whole stack, right? That's what we're trying to deliver from a network we need perspective. A little bit of insight on ITAS. Who's ready? Is everybody awake? Is this like early church? No? We don't have any hymns. I won't make you sing, but right. I get nothing but how come my base isn't in? How come my base isn't in? So let me tell you a little bit about where we're at. Again, from award of last September 30th of three risk reductions into bang. So right in 19, a lot of the stage setter final acquisition pieces. I'll call it the site surveys, the reviews of what's going on at the base, so we understand how operations works or it doesn't work, and so the vendor can start to do the pivot, do the dual ops period. In October, we're going to start chopping over about 10% of the population at some of the risk reduction bases. What's interesting there, from the network side of it, that's going to be our first tranche of, I'll call it bypassing the base and regional gateways, not the internet access points, but the base and regional gateways, and delivering those services from a commercial perspective with more resiliency, bandwidth, and interconnectivity with our cloud partners. So as you can imagine, there's two principal things out of that. Speed and user experience, right? How fast can I get to that service, and does that service really speed up and deliver me the capability I need? And of course, the other one is the cybersecurity side of that. Can vendors meet the equal or better kind of goal that we place there? What's their relationship with Cyber Command and AFCyber when an event does occur? Because an event will occur. That's just the nature of the beast. And so working through both the user-facing side of that and the security-facing side is really where Network as a Service is going to be aimed at in that 10% delivery. Also, what you'll see is, I'll call it the new wave of desktops and tablets and mobile. So that provisioning process through the vendor, all the way down to the, I'll call it, everybody knows what a Genius Bar, but that Genius Bar, that Tech Bar, whatever you want to call it, not your traditional CST mindset. So in this case, the industry partner coming in and providing that support in ways that we have historically not done. So more centralized to a base, the skills, the online tools, some of the tier 0 help desk processes are built in. There's an ITIL framework service portal behind that we've all talked about for a long time, but is fully implemented within this model, right? So changing a password or asking for a device, truly getting into that ITIL model where I can go into one place and order whatever services I need from an IT perspective. That's baked in as well. A little bit farther out, General Holmes probably talked about this. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see his speech. But this whole, how do we use classified for commercial, like cellular services in this new world era for SIPR, right? I've got a SIPR cell phone. We need to continue to propagate those thoughts out in a zero trust networking concept. So that's another thematic of all of this is how do you truly get to where, and this isn't meant to sound bad, but where we don't trust the network, right? There's many different reasons why the model has shifted between cloud and mobile. We've got to shift to the zero trust piece. The classified for commercial is a prime example of that. That's exactly what we're doing. I'm taking, in this case, an Android or a tablet, locking it down, encrypting it, and then delivering those services over an untrusted network. So there's absolutely ways we can do that. Edge Cloud was awarded a little bit later in the fiscal year, so that will be a little bit more later in 20. But again, this is that COOP resiliency and continuity of operations that you have at the forward edge of a base. So think an air traffic control tower application, a wing op center, but think enterprise cloud and cloud one, and then extend it to the edge with the edge. Maybe it's edge one, I don't know. Maybe we just coined something. All right, so cloud end to end, DevSecOps layered inside of that, new way of provisioning endpoints, new way of your Genius Bar support, and then a network that fundamentally, I won't say bypass is the wrong word, but 2/3 of that stack, we're gonna retool ourselves on. And of course, the concept is reducing latency and connectivity time for you to your applications. And ultimately, in 20, getting to a majority of that base transitioned over into an ITAS so we can do the assessment with OSD staff and the risk assessors to make a final go by this year. Cloud One. To be honest, if there's one thing that you're going to see, or that some are already seeing, but is the real game changer, we started seeing 19 that really becomes into 20, is our Cloud One initiative. Used to be called CCE. Very much appreciate the new rebranding. Nobody knew what CCE was. I think everybody gets what Cloud One is. It's our unified cloud platform, everything from infrastructure as a service all the way up to SaaS. Right, so we have been laser focused the last 2 years on what I call the GCDS kind of solution, which is through GCDS into the cloud, Amazon and Microsoft clouds to deliver applications. We've got about 29 of them in there right now. A lot in the A4 community, great progress there to build repeatable shared services. So lots of goodness there. We've also got the strategy confirmed and now resourced. I'll talk about that here in a second. To continue to build that out with more of a traditional IaaS PaaS stack, Amazon, Microsoft. The first one requires a pretty significant amount of refactoring. The second, not as much. So a little bit better for lift and shift, but it's also a little bit better for some of the cloud applications that we've got that we want to field. So this gives two principal IaaS PaaS solutions for system owners, business owners, CIOs, functional CIOs, and the like. The other big one that has really been caught like wildfire in the last, I would say, 90 days, 120 days. Mr. Lombardi here from the business system side, but also on the weapon system side. You talk software collider, a repeatable DevSecOps stack, in essence, 2 of them instantiated in here. So literally in the next 60 days, I think you're going to see one of those fully instantiated. And I think in probably about 120 days, 160 days, we'll have the other one out there. So using the great work that Kessel Run and Level Up and Bestman and all those programs have done, they have unified on 2 core platforms that we're instantiating into Cloud One. So again, you can look very tactically and say, well, it's just DevSecOps software. It's just things we do every day. But if you're ever going to get to unified data, unified application sharing, unified identity management to enable cloud, you got to have a stable foundation that we're all building from. And that's really what Cloud One's about. With respect to that piece of it. So that DevSecOps stack, and then I'll tie this into the software factory piece in a second. And ultimately, I say 20, but there's going to be work in 19. There was work in 18 on SaaS. But as far as a holistic enterprise strategy, I'm not sure we've kind of licked that one yet from a strategy perspective, so it's work to be done. But absolutely committed to finding where are the right SaaS solutions. So where we don't need to write code if we don't have to write code. It's kind of the larger ITAS piece. Only do those things in IT that are truly mission specific to the Air Force, not things that we can do because we have smart airmen. Down below, really the value prop. All these programs that don't have to build 70, 80% of their development environment, right? You can focus on code. You can focus on mission outcomes. And so that repeatability also helps immensely with the next topic, which is the cybersecurity framework, right? So what's broke, right? This slide is intentionally going to hurt your head. Because if anybody's figured out, I think me and Bob Skinner would love to hear it, of like how the network really works with all the base boundaries and regional boundaries and filtering and proxies and DNS and till your head explodes, right? We put layer upon layer upon layer, and if you see the Secretary speak on Digital Air Force, he talks to this quite a bit. And in the world of mobile, in the world of cloud, where is the perimeter anymore? The perimeter has fundamentally shifted. It will continue to shift. And not only that, the inside of the perimeter has gotten cloudy. It's encrypted. It's highly encrypted for 70, 80, and in some point within the next year or two, I imagine you're going to be in the 90+ percentile of encrypted traffic inside the perimeter. So it becomes harder and harder to defend in the middle. You got to move to the edges. And we also have to delayer the complexity. There's some best practice. I think General Skinner probably talked about this, but this delayering tools, but be really good at the tools you have. We were out at AFWorks that got to talk to a pretty major CISO of a multi-billion-dollar company. He runs 6 tools. And yes, they're part of the gaming community, the entertainment community. You can imagine the amount of dollars that he's protecting day in and day out. We actually got to see their NOC. It's crazy, and he does not have 50 tools because he has a lot of sensitive information. He has 6 tools, and he runs them at the PhD level, if you will. He runs them because everyone knows them. They know what the trips and triggers are, and he can action things day in and day out. Having 15, 20, 40 tools on our network, I would argue, is actually hurting us in our ability to understand and remediate. And so absolutely endorse what Bob Skinner and team are doing as we normalize that. What's that's done is all these things in the bottom, right? Slow to field, poor latency, until the user experience comes to where we're at today. And so where do we need to be? And this is not meant to be complex on the right, but it's what we're trying to say is you get resiliency, you get speed through resiliency, right? LEO, ComSatcom, 5G, 4G, wired, wireless networks. And so to some degree, you have to break down some of the perimeters to enable the interconnectivity, because that's where the resilience is going to be when we have to fight through some kind of cyber contested area. Not this single channel or even dual channel pass, which they're just going to bang on until they stop us. We have got to think more holistically about resiliency and cloud, how that helps us in diversity of data centers, diversity of the network path, diversity of our applications, the failover, all those things that inherently come with software-defined networks and basically software-defined clouds, right? Because in the day, the world has shifted on us. And so when we talk RMF, we've got to think differently about how we accept that risk or don't accept that risk. We oftentimes don't modernize because of these legacy paths. And Wanda and team are working to knock those barriers down. So what does that mean? From a policy perspective, we signed out the fast track ATO policy, I guess about 6 months ago now, 6, 7 months ago, somewhere around there. Who's using it? Anyone? One. All right. It is. And so there's some of that we'll get to. The legacy system, the comment was legacy system is hard to use, but I would also contend we're not using it even more holistically. It's not just about a cloud discussion. It's about repeatable process and also how do we accept risk that others have already accepted, right? You can say it's reciprocity. You can call it many different things, but how do you look holistically at the risk that you are taking? We still have people. I just was in a meeting in OSD where this was on our chesset effort, and we were like, well, we still got to test Office 365 because that's what we do when we fill systems. And we go, one is we've got 1 million users across the DoD and the federal space. Why are we going to go through DOT&E again? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. We'll do some integration testing and those kind of things, but the actual platform, do we need to test Amazon services or Microsoft services with respect to all of the back channel that have been FedRAMPed and FedRAMPed high, and they've gone through enormous amount of steps to get to operations. So let's just do that smartly. Where we need to, we will continue to do it. But part of Fast Track is also using kind of the upper cranium to say, here's the risk that I'm actually going to focus on and targeting that risk. was talking to somebody at breakfast this morning. He knows who I am. Not going to call out the company, but this kind of push software from the cloud to our endpoints for one of our major applications. And we're going to go, no, we're going to reaccredit that every time we push a new version. So what's the difference between patching a piece of software from the cloud or on-prem? That's basically the difference. We don't reaccredit software. We would die underneath the paperwork of that one. And so just because it's cloud-based doesn't mean that it's not an acceptable risk or even more acceptable risk than we had before, where we had no configuration management oftentimes of those patches. In this case, we've got a central IL5 instance that we're pushing a common configuration. So those are kind of the dimensions that I'd ask for you all to look at. And also use the CISO team, use the enterprise AO team and ACC to bounce these questions off of. If nothing else, you might be able to reduce 10, 20, 30% of your process that isn't value added to your risk management steps. The piece going forward, again, from a DevSecOps side of it, if you think of two common software factories, potentially a third if the Navy comes in, which I think they will, that we accredit the core of that DevSecOps platform. And in essence, you inherit all of those components, and then you can get to where you're just focused on your application, is really what's going to be next for 20. We are going to get that policy out to enable that whole environment to thrive. Huge amount of impact operationally, and I think a huge amount of impact internally in how we write code and test software. Also part of this, we've been tracking the Hack the Air Force events. We did one on Cloud One, immensely successful. In fact, I would contend, as they briefed us out, there was one vulnerability. It was actually an open source issue, part of the community, but they couldn't get in. So we ended up giving them insider credentials, said, okay, we want you to keep going. And they were getting frustrated, so we gave them insider credentials so they can continue the work. And all the vulnerabilities you saw were basically insider vulnerabilities, but we also contained the blast zones inside of that. So it was kind of the perfect scenario, right? We validated that it was a hardened environment. We gave them insider threat, insider kind of baseball credentials to see what they could do, and they could only stay inside of their blast radius for their application, which is the perfect thing that we wanted. That, along with pen tests, and those elements are really key. Again, if you heard me talk, USDA meat inspection process, we don't inspect every piece of meat, but every piece of meat could kill you. How do you accredit the process and then revalidate on some recurring basis? And that's where these pen tests and bug bounty programs come in. So pretty exciting to enable those software factories and DevSecOps as we move forward. To the right, nobody chuckled. This can't be paperwork. We've actually got a couple demos here of the work we're trying to push out with the functional CIOs. We just signed, this is how committed AQ is, we signed a dual memo between AQ and us to push out ARAD across the PEO systems. And so those demos are really trying to get, how do we get a forward-facing portal view of the risk that a functional CIO or a PEO is accepting on a day-to-day basis, or MAGCOM for that matter. How do we give you a view to the actual risk that you're taking or not taking every day when you come in? Have you ever heard me talk as an A1 CIO in the post-OPM breach? Kind of an interesting job decision on my part, but what it showed me was when I came into it, I said, how are we assessing risk? And we're assessing risk by how late my ATO packages are. I had no real clean visibility into what patches, what versions of software, all the key things that was actually going to make me more secure work. And so that's where we're going with the demos here, is to give you a glimpse at the realm of the possible to start shifting this thing truly into risk management, where we can give you a dashboard of your risk, where you can go out and with tactical precision take those elements out. Turn off that red port that got turned on last night. Figure out that 4 gig just got exfiltrated by somebody for some reason. Don't know if it was good, bad, or indifferent, but I know it happened, and I can actually action and go talk to that person or get others involved. That's what we're trying to do. And this big shift in 20, we started it last year, in 20 is going to be turning this thing to a, no kidding, we've been talking about continuous monitoring. We've got the tools, the capabilities to action it in 20 and put the policies behind it. Anybody awake from church yet? Does that make sense? I mean, this is not throwing away RMF. What this is doing is making it applicable to where we can actually manage risks across the enterprise. All right, last piece on here. The digital you, the digital me, the digital you all. This isn't just us inside of our community. We have to arm every airman in the Air Force. Again, I talked to my 14-year-old in these speeches, and it is my great awakening moment every time when I see how he learns on YouTube, social media. At first, I was like, eh. And then when he built a computer from scratch in his head off of YouTube videos without manuals, my aha moment was upon me. The next generation, this generation, we've got to start to shift how we do education and training. And so Digital U is going to be our first attempt at that. How do we take commercial curated content, best of breed content, merge that with, I'll call it the traditional education and training system, but deliver that curated content to every airman. That logistician is also at the end of the flight line that got parametric data back, that how can he use a basic analytical tool to do analysis on that weapon system and not have to ship it off to the mothership in Pentagon for analysis, right? So this is not just our own technical competencies inside our community. It's also the way that we push out good digital content at the speed of the industry. So the digital you, the digital me, digital all of our community starts to up our game on data, analytics. If you want to be a coder, right? There's so many opportunities in this next generation. We have got to arm that now for where we're going forward. All right. So that's kind of the end-to-end of from people to process to the tech stack. Pretty big sexy for 8 o'clock in the morning. We got some great work ahead of us. The last thing I'm going to say before we do some questions is the funding that Bob Skinner referred to yesterday is real. The corporate system is supporting who has been here from PBD 720 days on. We're past that. The budget didn't get it kind of go like this, it went like that. So you're going to see a lot in the coming weeks on the final push to talk on what the dollars are and how that affects, and we'll have our digital modernization forum tomorrow where we'll talk about that in more depth in-house. Significant investment by corporate because they recognize the value of the digital Air Force into multi-domain operations. So this isn't just speechware, this isn't just vaporware, this is actually your senior leaders investing in what you do, but what's critical for us is delivering at speed, delivering through the risk, and delivering in an era that's really going to change the space on getting it back to a near peer fight versus a peer fight. We all know what the foreign countries are doing, and we've got to accelerate, and we've got to take some more risk, and we got to drive these innovative approaches with our AQ brethren, our PEOs, our functionals to drive this to the next level. So I think we got about 10 minutes for Q&A.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, after the question portion, we'll do the 10-minute break.
We'd please ask audience members, if possible, to take that 10-minute break in place. At this time, we will now be taking questions from Mr. Marion. As a reminder, those questions will be taken via email at AFITC questions@gmail.com. Again, that's AFITC questions@gmail.com. Over to the booth for questions.
The voice from God.
Good morning, sir. The first question is, as technology implementation gets more complex, the potential for divergence from our joint partners grows exponentially. How are we integrating with our sister services to ensure we are interoperable and interdependent from the data center down to the tactical edge?
Great question. So from an ITAS perspective, the Army is all in with us. So they have signed an agreement leveraging Cloud One, so they're not going to build their own cloud infrastructure. They're basically leveraging what General Schmidt and team have been providing over the last couple of years to their next level. So they're not going to recreate the wheel. They've also joined us on some of the work on network as a service and EIT as a service. We have always been partnered with the Navy, right? They have their next gen program. We share day in and day out. And then at the OSD level, in fact, I just got the document from Mr. DC yesterday of how he's trying to orchestrate all that together. So Mr. DC is doing a phenomenal job kind of putting all the piece parts together with our joint brethren. Also, you probably heard of the DIOS acquisition. That is upon us. It's getting pretty close. So our chess initiative rolls into that. All of our cloud initiatives will leverage JEDI when it's awarded. That's a cloud contract. That gives us an enterprise cloud contract is the bottom line. So we'll leverage those tools as they get awarded. We have current contracts, and so we will sundown what we're doing and kind of migrate in. Those are discussions we have pretty regularly up on the OSD staff. But if you think of the network layer, network as a service, very much partnered with the Army. And the goodness there is they're going down a little bit different approach in some areas, and we're flight following with them. So General Fogarty, General Crawford, we have pretty recurring meetings. We're trying to keep synchronized, certainly synchronized with the PEO staff. So I honestly think we couldn't be in a better time. General Skinner talked about yesterday, the leadership alignment in the Air Force has been phenomenal. I would also say Mr. DC has orchestrated the service layer like I have not seen orchestrated before as well. So these services, cloud, network, all of those elements, we have a consistent path that we're all going down together. It truly is aligned.
All right, sir, the next question we have is, why hasn't there been an effort to improve user experience by doing away with the standard desktop configuration? The latest Windows provides that necessary security.
I've never heard that question before. Yeah, where's Scott? Where's Scott? Pack, I know you're out there. You better be out there somewhere. We got a couple great leaders right now, Kenyon Anderson, Colonel Packler, Scott Heitman, Kevin Kirsch. And to be frank, we've been having a lot of frank discussions on the phone, in person. We have got to get at this issue. So they do have the line of efforts that General Skinner covered yesterday. Desktop is one of them. These layers, both from a current infrastructure and our future infrastructure kind of dimensions. So all those lines of effort are being parsed out. The key is, and I will tell you, and I worked with Scott for many years back when ACC had its big outages back in the day. There's never a true smoking gun to our infrastructure, right? We're one of the largest singularly run networks in the world, if you didn't know that. When I have discussions with a Cisco or other CEO, there's not many that deal in the same numbers that we deal in. You get the 100, 200,000 people, maybe 250, stretching at 300. Those numbers of corporations go down. And so scaling all of the nuances, like I said in A1, I had a federal data center I was connected to, a Randolph data center I was connected to, an Oracle data center I was connecting to, an Amazon data center I was connecting to, APC I was connecting to. And so transactional path for every application was somewhat different. And so typically what I would call it, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. So to some degree, we're taking those key lines of effort, those top 4, 5, 6, decomposing those because we think that's where most of the pain is. But we have to be cognizant that there's other elements out there that are kind of the mice in the field that we have to be aware of as well. So, but the first thing, we talk about SMIME and Active Directory and identity. There are some key things we're tackling right now. At some point, if we don't get better, I'm at the point of going, we need to have a down day where we focus nothing else on this. If I'm going to urge, if I could say anything to all of you, is don't accept the level of service. We've stopped op-rep reporting. We have all these outages, but yet op-rep reports go all the way to the chief and secretary. And while I certainly don't like the blunt instrument in my forehead, it's needed when it comes to money and support and advocacy on these programs. So it's a good and a bad thing, but I would argue work with your comm squad. And if you're a comm squadron commander, please keep your pulse on it. I know you don't have all the authorities. A lot of those things are centralized, but you still have ownership of your network. And General Kennedy may talk about this in his panel, but he talks pretty regularly about where commanders own their domain, we actually are doing pretty well. When it's not mine, it's those guys over in 24th. CCRI numbers go down, compliance, user experience, engagement with the wing commander goes down accordingly. So the more you are engaged with 24th, with us, PEO, your MAGCOM, kind of through that chain, the better the experience normally is. All right, I think we got time for one more here.
All right, sir, final question. With the increase of developing mobile applications to the warfighter, what is the overall vision with blending the RMF process to mobile development?
Yes. No, great question. What I would say, the first piece I would go back to is the DevSecOps platform. So the work that I think Bespin's kind of leading, some of the other programs are leading, that's going to be the initial point. I would say we haven't gotten at a full mobile to RMF strategy, but ideally, those mobile content pieces and application layers are built into those DevSecOps platforms. I know Bespin's thinking about it, or working through that. I'm just thinking about it, working through that one. And again, where we have one of those leading PEOs of adopting that and rolling in. To the larger question, RMF, right? DevSecOps, Agile, Scrum, all those things fall apart in RMF, right? In the traditional RMF, right? When we apply the 900 controls and the way we normally do it, it's to the point of we have to change the way we look at continuous monitoring, code reviews, pen tests, bug bounties. It reiterates what we're talking about here. So from the aspect of mobile being part of an agile development strategy, we do have to link those, and those are exactly what we're doing with the software factory, right? So if Bespin is sitting on top of, could be a level up DevSecOps template, is that enough acronyms for one speech? Right? If all of that's unified, then that RMF process for that mobile app can be pretty streamlined with respect to just the application and the application risk that sits on top of it. So that's kind of the mindset with the DevSecOps kind of common core framework that's sitting on top of Cloud One. So I think that's the last time here. Were we able to find?
We're going to do that right now, sir.
All right. But I want to close by just saying thank you. We all have a role in this fight. We are at another level of engagement with the chief and the secretary. They want us driving change, driving innovation, driving technology that involves us taking managed risk and managed investments. And I always tell my staff, if you're not #uncomfortable, you're not going fast enough. I'm not saying suicide speed. I'm not saying those kind of things where we can't execute dollars or failed programs or all that kind of stuff. But what we can't accept the status quo, we're kind of going, yeah, we're moving forward a little bit. We've got to get on the sprinter's block and continue to move. I think we have been. So I talked to 5, I would consider major acquisitions and risk reductions in 1 year, going to from in essence award to bang inside of 1 year, to boots on the ground, fielding capabilities. You are doing it, but we have to keep that up in every line of work that we're doing, not just in the ones that we have here. So with that, thank you very much for everything you do. Hope you have a great conference, and I look forward to seeing you even more in person on the Digital Modernization Forum tomorrow as well.
Thank you, Mr. Marion. Because you are the sponsor of this event, we're kind of wondering who's going to give you that gift. So this part of the audience right here, if you think you are the youngest cyber professional sitting, come on down. The youngest person. Come on, somebody.
Come on. It's a lot of lieutenant
Whole
colonels
section,
in here.
all the way up to those posts. If you
Don't
think
be
you are
scared.
the youngest cyber professional,
There's
come on
one.
down. Someone thinks they're older than
We're
this.
changing the game a little bit this year. Instead of coining me, I get to coin an airman in the audience. So where do you work out of? Offutt, 55th? Where at? So what do you?
What do I do? I work in Amwick, we're alternate missile warning. Sorry.
That is awesome. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
And I get to give you one.
Okay.
So everything you do,
Okay.
it's a cyber coin for excellence. Keep us safe at night.
I will.
You got a great job, great mission.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Again, our next speaker is on the hour, so please take your break inside this room. I know that sounds kind of silly, but we don't want mass exodus. Mr. Moore will be up shortly. Thank you. Nice. As everybody runs out of here.
think what working in the team dynamic here at Air University in a flight room does is it teaches me how to maximize the potential of all of those human systems and then how to build connectedness between those systems, build a network. And I think that when you see all of those people operating at their full potential and fully connected, it's an undefeatable force. And I think that's one of the competitive advantages we have as a military over other nations is we value all of the teammates' thoughts and we assemble together, and it's just powerful. Some of the noblest, the greatest learning occurs in moments of reflection. And Air University is about bringing experts in and allowing them to reflect together, redefine a trajectory, and then move out in a new direction that takes you to a new destination. And that's Air University.
The national security environment, it's unstable. You can't predict when a conflict is going to happen. You don't know where it's going to happen. You don't know who your adversaries are always going to be. And so you have to be able to rapidly evolve. So one of the things we're actually specified to do in the national defense strategy is to have rapidly evolving forces. I believe education is the key to that. It gives you the cognitive agility to be able to diagnose your environment and then quickly respond to changes in that environment that you just can't predict. So one of the challenges that we face as Chief Master Sergeants and really at all levels is you focus on what your day-to-day job is. And so one of the most important things that we do for our leaders is give them that strategic perspective, national defense strategy, objectives, Chief of Staff for the Air Force priorities, Secretary of the Air Force priorities, and then how do they fit into that overall scheme in terms of organizing to meet those objectives. And that's Air University.
Air University it's an organization that establishes the cradle to grave development of our enlisted corps. Because I firmly believe that, we should continue to learn and grow throughout our life. But from a career standpoint, from the beginning of our career to the moment we separate, by whatever means that may be, that we should have that continuum of learning. And Air University is that organization, the entity that develops and, as necessary, adjusts that curriculum to meet the demands of our current world, to make sure that our airmen, Big A, can meet any challenge and have the intellectual capacity and the academic background and the education to deal with any competitor out there and accomplish any mission that is asked for us. And that's Air University.
I think education across the board in our Air Force keeps us relevant. And I think what we need to do is really kind of get an appreciation for what's the face of our Air Force. So what we've got is we've got people that are coming from all different backgrounds, all walks. Everybody's got a different story, something that is important to them in their growth, their development, and who they define themselves are. They came from great families. Some of them came from great schools. And coming into the Air Force as a service is something that they wanted to experience. We have other people that have come from military families where just continuation of military service was logical. And we got some people that are coming into this Air Force that didn't grow up with anything. And this is their first chance in life that they can make something of themselves, that they can actually, if they roll up their sleeves and put in the work, can make something of themselves. And so if we as an Air Force value what the face of the Air Force is, then for every single one of those people that come in with a story, we've got to do something to develop them, not only to keep them relevant, but develop them as a human being so that they can not only contribute to us, but turn that back around and contribute on the outside. That's our university.
Speaking from someone who sits in the office of the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, that is his premise, is based around developing leaders. I think I always reflected when I talk to first sergeants or even airmen, and I say our Air Force started in a garage, right? A bicycle shop. And you can look up in the sky now and think about what we have flying out there, F-35s. We have some power, all based on innovation. So that's how I see AU, being an innovative force that is a force multiplier. I think a lot of folks don't even understand what AU actually touches. This is where impact happens. So I'm a former basic military training instructor, but I'll tell you that that premise as the gateway to our Air Force, this is the secondary. What you do here impacts everyone. Different optics that are touch points to developing our airmen. You can't put a price tag on that, and that's Air University.
Well, I think fundamentally education is important because we can get so busy doing the things that we've always done that we forget that there are other ways to approach problems, and the methodologies that come with education and thinking and reading what's written in these books by these different experts that have delved in this incredible array of topics that we're going to delve into really kind of opens our aperture and our mind to how to approach the way we think about challenges and to tap into talents and thoughts and expertise that might not be leveraged unless we open those pathways that you can open through education. Well, the students that come here have a lot of credibility in their own right. And really what that allows us to do is to share ideas and to advance thought on important issues to the Air Force and to the Joint Force and to our international partners. And that's Air University.
We have
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. After our next keynote speaker, there will be two events starting at 10 o'clock. Here in the Impact, the ITAS Vendors Executive Panel will be led by Major General Kevin Kennedy. Breakout sessions will be in your respective conference rooms. At this time, I would like to introduce our next keynote speaker. He's the Vice President of Engineering and lead of Google Cloud Artificial Intelligence, Dr. Andrew Moore. Dr. Moore is a distinguished computer scientist with expertise in machine learning and robotics. Dr. Moore's research interests encompass the field of big data, applying statistical methods and mathematical formulas to massive quantities of information ranging from web searches to astronomy to medical records in order to identify patterns and extract meaning from that information. His past research has included improving the ability of robots and other automated systems to sense the world around them and respond accordingly and appropriately. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Moore.
Thank you very much. I am really honored for the opportunity to be here today. My whole career, I've loved the field of artificial intelligence and the promise that by automating some of the most complex reasoning tasks, we've got a chance of actually improving the human condition. So I'd like to begin with a story. And the story is about something which happened about 2 years ago. Back then I was at Carnegie Mellon University, and it's a story which starts unhappy, then gets happy, but then gets unhappy again. So we're prepared to experience a roller coaster of emotions. All right, so there was an earthquake near a nuclear storage facility, and the Department of Energy was really worried because there was evidence that some storage canisters may have been moved and conceivably spilled. And there was a concern about the radiation levels where it was not really going to be possible or safe to take people into the storage facility, which is underground. So they contacted Red Whittaker, a roboticist at Carnegie Mellon University who built a whole bunch of robots to do crazy things. A couple of decades before, he'd built the robots which went in to clean up 3 Mile Island. And he and a bunch of grad students and engineers from the Robotics Institute there worked like crazy for about 2 weeks to put together a new autonomous platform. It had to be autonomous because it was going to likely be communications denied in some parts of the facility. And it had to be really safe because it would be, to put it mildly, embarrassing to send in the robot and have the robot knock over one of these canisters. So there was lots of work, lots of rebuilding of software, patching together of bits of computer vision systems, bits of control systems, stuff that Red and some of the students in their own PhD thesis had been using. And they did manage to build a system which successfully went in to survey without needing to send a human in, and which was able to, for a short period of time when needed, operate autonomously during it. So that's the happy news. We've gone from, oh no, there's a problem in a nuclear storage facility, up to that a small team of really dedicated computer scientists, computer vision folks, roboticists were able to do something about it. But I'm not satisfied, and I'm not really satisfied with the field of artificial intelligence at the moment. And that's because the team which did this was pretty much what I would call artisanal. It's a small group of really experienced roboticists who have done this kind of things many times before, and they were using the skills of the trade, if you like, things which they just picked up along the way to solve this problem. And when I thought about it and thought about all the other big emergencies likely to be coming up in the world, or the things we could potentially do if we could duplicate Red Whittaker and his students by 10,000, I was really disappointed that so many other good things that we might be able to use artificial intelligence for, we can't do right now because we don't have the world trained up for doing these kinds of things, nor do we have the kind of stable development platforms, the kind of things we were talking about in the previous keynote this morning. The world does not really have those kinds of things to stably build autonomous and artificial intelligence systems on. And that's really going to be the theme of this talk. So if I could bring up the slides. There we go, great. So I've been kind of lucky in my career. I've had the opportunity to work in academia and a few times with Google, building very large machine learning systems there. So Google is lucky. It's an example of an organization which has been able to hire many of these artisanal types of folks. In fact, to be frank, while I was Dean of Computer Science at CMU, I was grinding my teeth about how many really strong faculty and students were actually moving over to industry, leaving a little bit of a void of how we educate the future series of artisans. But on the bright side, places like Google and the other big internet companies have been able to really show the power of artificial intelligence through building autonomous vehicles, through building dialogue systems, which these days actually work, though I wish they worked better. And then in the world of sort of academia, really interesting things are going on in AI, such as the system which can now beat humans, even the best humans in the world, at poker. It is a very large supercomputer. It performs a combination of machine learning and a very old-fashioned algorithm, very large-scale linear programming, to come up with strategies which can find the optimal thing to do, accounting for the fact that the opponent is likely to be feeding them misleading signals, because that's obviously the essentials of poker, and accounting for the fact that its own actions must be misleading to the opponent or else it will be exploited. That was a huge moment for me in the world of AI. Other things like building systems, this is the Pan-STARRS telescope in the middle of the slide, for being able to piece together from small single-digit number of photons enough energy, enough evidence to decide if there's risky near-Earth asteroids out there. And then work on things like very, very precise robotics for aircraft paint removal. So all these things are going on, but I'm really sad about the fact that we live in a world where this stuff is artisanal. I think I moved the slides forward too much, so could we just jump back a slide? Thank you. Here's what I'm going to do this morning. Talk about what we in industry at the moment see as the ways that we can de-artisanalize and put in systems in place, which means that magnitudes more people can be innovative and jump into the world of artificial intelligence and be capable of building these sorts of systems. I'll talk very much about how you have to be introducing technology and a platform and change management in order to run a successful AI project which has a clear beginning, middle, and end. And then I will actually touch upon something which is very interesting to all of us, which is another approach that we're using for dealing with the fact that there's not enough machine learning and AI experts, is that there's been pretty significant breakthroughs in the last 18 months on automating some of the jobs of machine learning experts and data scientists. So that's going to be an interesting thing to talk about. Okay. So we are projecting that there's a need. by 2021 in the commercial world, and based on what I've heard so far at this conference, I'm sure this is also going to be true in the armed forces, 75% of enterprise applications will use AI. Autonomy, which is, if you like, at the very top of the AI stack, is coming into play in a large way in both vehicles and other large bits of machinery. And the growth, fortunately, of the number of people with training in AI will have massively outpaced the growth of folks with training in other disciplines. So these are interesting things. Here's if you like, this is a way of setting up the expectations for the big commercial battles which are happening at the moment between the major AI providers and what's at stake. So here on the right-hand side, we have a graph which comes from an in-depth study by economists at McKinsey as to what's going to happen to 3 types of corporations over the next decade. In dark blue, you see corporations who are investing in automation, using AI to make products higher quality, and to make decision processes move faster. And the y-axis is is basically the financials of that particular company. So the companies in dark blue are the ones who are investing sort of immediately in artificial intelligence-based solutions. Big commercial e-commerce companies have already done this to great benefit, but many other companies are just beginning that journey. And they are going to have to invest over a few years, but then by the end of next decade, they will be in a very strong position with a very large growth as a result of doing this. Those are the front runners. The followers who want to wait and see what the fast-moving companies do, they won't get killed, but they will lose out on a big opportunity by spending a lot of time catching up, though they will eventually be able to use artificial intelligence with less effort. That's the black line. And then the light blue line are the laggards. Those are the ones whose CEOs and boards right now are really nervous because they don't quite know what to do about artificial intelligence, and without a plan, they're going to get into trouble. So, for me, the thing which is exciting about artificial intelligence is it unambiguously can do good. And we have seen that with things like the use of robotics in safety, disaster recovery, and we've seen it in some of the successful, very modern consumer companies like the Googles, the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Apples. But it's proving to be much harder to go into all industries and deal with this. One issue we're facing is that identifying the right problems to start introducing artificial intelligence into an organization is really difficult. And one of the things which terrified me as I was looking across industry and some government work on artificial intelligence is how many proof of concept problems there are, how many projects are going on which are labeled proof of concept, and how few of them at this point have landed into a full deployment. The scarcity of machine learning expertise is something that I'm worried about. There is a huge fight for folks with these skills, and certainly I believe that the United States really needs to take it seriously, that it has to get hold of those people. The third thing which is interesting is the importance of remembering that part of our job in artificial intelligence is to build autonomy. We have to build things which can give intelligent advice to human decision makers. And the concern I have there is that in recent years, there's been such a focus on machine learning, which is an incredibly important part of artificial intelligence, that we've forgotten the importance of going the final step to make sure that whatever you've done to combine these really interesting sources of information, you can also then land that with a system which can give useful and explainable advice to people. And the final issue is something which, for example, we at universities were pretty bad at, which is going from a system which you put together in a hurry for a demonstration or for a single mission or because of an emergency, such as the Red Whittaker story, instead turning that into something which is running routinely, day after day, week after week, year after year, on a stable platform which can be maintained just like other software systems. As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, if you have a machine learning system which is actually adapting to the world while it's in operation, that gives you huge advantages that you don't have a system which, for instance, enters a new environment and is suddenly incapable of operating. It will adapt. That's the good side. But the bad side is the monitoring and the making sure that your system is not going crazy by one of at least a dozen statistical disasters that you could have while you're permanently learning over a long time. Making sure that is successful really does require long-term work. Let me describe this fourth issue more clearly. This one is not a safety critical issue, but I'm sure many of you can see how there are going to be safety critical and national security issues which have similar problems. In the world of internet ranking, where someone types in a query and you get a set of search results, the big internet companies use machine learning from what people in the past have clicked on to help a learning model be able to predict for the future what people are most likely to click on. The machine learning system at that point is actually pretty smart. It's certainly better than any handwritten rules for deciding what's going to be most useful to the user. But it also can start to hallucinate. The way it can start to hallucinate is, suppose the machine learning system just doesn't have enough experience with a certain kind of query, and it wrongly thinks that what would have been a great result to show isn't going to be useful. Suppose someone, for instance, wants to go on vacation in Tahoe. They've typed in Tahoe into their search window, and they just get lots of results about the Chevy Tahoe truck. Now, the machine learning system, which has started to predict that people are going to click on results for Chevy Tahoe, will never even try to show results about the city of Tahoe. And so it's learning really well, but because it's making decisions, which means that it's not showing the right information, it actually starts to get really confused because it's never learning that it's making a mistake. And so machine learning systems which actually guide a robot or a search system or even a human advice giving system can start to make serious mistakes when their own predictions are affecting what kind of data they see in the future. So these are all reasons why artificial intelligence, I'm always very nervous and careful when I'm building a new deployment, because each of these four issues can damage our success. So these are the things that from the commercial viewpoint we're pushing on. Making sure that we can have a flexible cloud. Part of the reason for this is it means that people are able to run their systems autonomously away from the network, or be secure enough that they can, when necessary, be able to make decisions without data communications. It needs to be built for users, and this is a common problem, is that one builds a advanced autonomous system, but the people who are meant to use it are just alienated by it because it's coming across as this pompous expert who knows the best thing to do but is unable to explain it. We need to create a world where folks can innovate quickly, where they can everyone in this room should be able, over a weekend, or maybe it's their 14-year-old kid, but one or the other should be able to build an AI system using off-the-shelf components. And then we folks in the internet industry who are helping provide the tools behind this need to provide the tools which avoid some of the many kinds of disastrous mistakes that machine learning systems can make. So we've broken this into 3 ways to bring artificial intelligence into organizations. I'm going to quickly talk about each of these 3 approaches, and I strongly advise, as you as a large, one of the largest organizations in the United States are bringing in artificial intelligence, to really think clearly about what combination of these 3 you need to bear on any particular problem. So when I'm dealing with people who need artificial intelligence for some reason, I'm dealing with sometimes with organizations or subcomponents of an organization that really have no AI expertise. And of course, that makes me very nervous, but we still have to be able to do something in that case. Sometimes we're dealing with an organization which has got excellent training and education and has managed to produce plenty of folks who've learned at least the theory and examples of using big machine learning systems, big computer vision systems, speech understanding, signal integration systems. And in those cases, there's still a lot of work to do to make those really important people as productive as possible. And in the third case, it's getting increasingly common that we work with organizations which have incredibly smart engineers, folks trained up in perhaps traditional statistics, mathematics, traditional information technology, who want to be able to switch and kind of learn how to build AI systems while using tools which support the fact that initially they don't know everything. So let's go through these 3 different paths. Some things, but not many, I would say maybe 20% of the AI applications I work with are general horizontally applicable things. And so one part of the internet AI industry at the moment is really devoted to identifying and finding these AI systems which are somewhat off the shelf or turnkey. I really warn, though, that this is, in my opinion, a minority of cases. Most artificial intelligence deployments, especially in an organization with such a unique mission as the Air Force, the majority of AI you will use will not be able to be built from off-the-shelf components. But let's look at the cases where they can be. What's happening now is that across different verticals, many places, including Google, are focusing on identifying those solutions which we can use. And let me talk about some examples. One thing which has turned out to be just a generally useful tool is document understanding. The notion that when you have large piles of information, such as maintenance reports, which have traditionally been on paper, and even now in some cases are, and you need to turn that into structured information, which can sit in a true system of record about what's happened, especially happened in the past when records were paper. It is to a large extent more of a solved problem now to deal with this. So this is one area where I don't feel we need to worry too much about artisanal solutions. Another one is contact centers, or the technology which the internet companies have been fighting over to produce spoken language assistants. That is really mature, and at this point we have found a large horizontal group of companies and organizations, including many government organizations, which currently run contact centers of humans giving advice to other humans. And it is a relatively straightforward, with all sorts of caveats, job to start to turn those not only into systems where the computer can transcribe the speech into text requests, but actually fields those requests, understand what tasks the human caller is trying to accomplish, and help them do that in an automated fashion. Things involving control systems with very large numbers of variables. This is an area where an AI technology called reinforcement learning has proved very successful. And so this is another broad enough use case that without too much specialized integration, it's possible to build horizontal tools which can be taken more off the shelf to do some of this kind of optimal control. And then many things, you won't be surprised to see this, many things involving portable devices are very advanced in their capabilities because so much investment, hundreds of billions of dollars of investment have gone into making these, if you like, cute consumer apps, which are now readily available. And that technology is also useful in many non-consumer cases. These next two areas are really my passion. And they're my passion because I do want the world to not have to wait for Red Whittaker when they have their next emergency. This is how we empower the builders, the people who do have these skills, but we want them to be as productive as possible. So if there's one part of the talk to really lean forward and ingest, this is where my super excitement is. Here's what I'm facing. Unlike the rest of information technology, where fortunately over the last 20 or 30 years, we've built up pipelines of folks to get educated, in the world of machine learning and artificial intelligence, including machine learning for cyber attack detection, fraud detection, or information warfare, there are very, very few people with deep expertise among the whole pool of potential users of information technology. Only that little red slice, those 10K there, are what are deep learning researchers, folks who are familiar enough to be able to take advantage of and actually control and improve advanced machine learning systems. There are millions, fortunately, by now, of machine learning experts, but they are very hard to get hold of and retain unless either you pay them a whole lot of money, which is not very satisfying, or you give them a really meaningful mission, something which really inspires them. So I got two problems for those folks. I want to make every individual in that yellow band as productive as possible because there aren't enough of them. And then, of course, I want to educate the next generation to be very strong at this so that our orange band gets larger. Then we have the world of the developers. And the end of this talk, you're going to see what we're going to try to do to help those developers level up their skills and be able to integrate artificial intelligence without having to be experts in all the risks and tweaking schemes that you might need. And then, in many cases, but not all, we do see the opportunity for low-code and no-code uses of artificial intelligence by business users who just are used to using spreadsheets and want to start being able to use more powerful tools to get information from those spreadsheets. Perhaps in the cases where those spreadsheets have got references to large databases of images or sound or signals or open source documents, for example. So this is how we try to run AI projects, bearing in mind that that small orange sliver of machine learning experts is so small that they must be valued and empowered. And in particular, given that it breaks my heart when I see these machine learning experts being brought in for projects which only make it to proof of concept, but then don't actually get into deployment, really being careful to make sure that the projects they're working on are going to be successful. So as we work with partners who've got machine learning experts, this is the, if you like, the game plan. First thing is, we have to make sure that the project is significant and important. That's because there are so many dangers down the road for an artificial intelligence project that has got to have a big prize at the end to keep folks excited about it. The mistake I've sometimes seen made in an organization is a CEO wants to begin getting their organization familiar with AI, and they choose a minor side issue. For instance, a retailer might choose just cute marketing robots to sort of attract customers as their big AI project, when in fact the use of automation in retail is usually about supply chains, logistics, making sure that you don't run out of inventory and you don't overstock inventory. So the significance is very serious. The next thing, this is to avoid what I would call the science project phenomenon, is that someone at a very senior level, I'm talking about the in an organization such as the Air Force, someone at the general level is involved in the project and interested enough that every couple of weeks they need to see updates on how it is going. Because as a real automation project happens, again, there's going to be a lot of pushback and disappointments, and it needs someone to keep it moving and keep folks encouraged. And part of the reason for that is, I wouldn't say this is happening, to my knowledge, so much in the armed forces, but in the commercial industry, we do have the phenomenon of CEOs reading an article in The Economist about the importance of artificial intelligence, saying, we've got to get started on something, handing it over, or forming an AI team, but then kind of leaving it on the side for a year or two, kind of not paying much more attention to it, and then the initiative sort of dwindles as it hits some of the roadblocks. The next thing is, we will always insist on an AI project that you have someone in the role of what we in the internet world call a product manager. The leads, and my favorite is actually if these are two-in-a-box leads, are an engineering technology expert and an expert who knows how to continually, every hour, be asking the question, well, what are the final set of users going to think of this? How are they going to use it? For example, let's take a project where we wanted to automate the analysis of found footage. Thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of hours of video. And at the moment, there are humans being used to track and label all the objects in there. Suppose we said, we are going to try to automate that so that these human labelers can actually be doing higher cognitive content tasks other than just drawing nice rectangles. That project, what I'm advising in this third box is that that project doesn't immediately disappear into a technology world where someone solves the technology problem. There has to be a product manager with them all the time asking, well, exactly how are the current folks using this? What do they want to see? What do they want to spend their time doing? So that the outcome of this project is something which actually delights the user at the end rather than getting thrown away. Then, once you set up your project so that you've got experienced engineering lead and experienced product manager, they split into two tracks for an AI project. There's the technology track and the change management track. The big issue here is that at the point where you are doing something significant enough to change the way the organization operates, you have to be working as much on the sociological questions as to how you manage that as to the technological questions. So I'll quickly go through the technology track because we'll be talking about that in subsequent slides. The technology track is all about speed, agility, how to set up a platform where your technologists can experiment and take feedback from the product manager, who should always be shouting at the technologists about what's going to make the users happy and what isn't, and let them keep on iterating while knowing that the final product is going to be supported on a stable platform. Then the project on the technology track works towards a measurable proof of concept so that we know that this thing is more effective than what we were doing with humans before. The next part of what we need in a platform, and this is the thing absent from Red Whittaker, the roboticist's life at the moment, is something where you can take your proof of concept code, and the dream is you click a button and that gets transferred into secure code, which is able to run on the cloud or on local servers in an on-prem type of way, and in some cases, of course, able to run on the edge in a viable way where that part of the project is as automated as possible, so that the folks who've been doing the math, building the proof of concept and measuring and hearing what users have to say can continue to do that while knowing that the launching of the system into actual production is a managed routine affair. So this one is big, and for me at least, I learned that the hard way, how important it is to do this. Make sure your innovative folks are able to keep on doing these little agile loops, but there's a system to support it so that when they say, this system is better than the previous one, let's launch it, that there's at that point a mostly automated process of publishing it on a platform, running canary testing, quality testing, and then getting it out so that it's then running and monitoring for cases where the machine learning system itself is either hallucinating or perhaps making other serious forms of mistakes. Then at the same time, we have the change management track, which is looking not only at the happiness of the users, but in the acceptance by the lawyers, human rights folks, and the general public when applicable, to make sure that it is something which passes the smell test for a Western liberal democracy as to what we want to do. And the danger here is because the general public is rightly skeptical of producing AI monsters like the Terminator, there is absolutely no excuse for not really checking every step of the way that you are avoiding the unintended consequences. And these days, there are methodologies for checking things like whether your system has inadvertently brought in bias by reacting to the skin tones of folks being computer vision analyzed differently depending on their skin tone, or 100 other horrible stories I can tell you about well-intentioned pieces of technology ending up doing something which would perhaps rightly freak out the public. And then change management. I've never successfully launched a big AI project based on technology alone. It has to involve people who are willing and able and skilled enough to help a whole organization change the way that it's doing business. And if you don't need to do that, you may actually not have a significant enough artificial intelligence opportunity. The use of automation is to help folks within an organization up-level the cognitive level of the things that they're doing, or to protect folks who are going into harm's way through automation. And so that does mean changes in the way a system operates. I want to make sure I don't run out of time. So I'm going to jump over at some discussions I had about advances in the hardware to support all of this. Instead, I'm going to go over to what we've been really focusing on to try to support that project structure that I described before. A platform which allows you to do that building work, but then to some extent, and to be frank, we are 2 or 3 years away from this being as easy as I'm currently describing, to be able to say, here is the prototype code, here is the code which does the validation on live data that the system is not going crazy, here is the red button which transfers that into a secure operating situation, and in some cases where you've got hybrid cloud with different parts of the AIs working at different levels, you're able to operate in a zero trust network for the actual AI integrations. Next part is the productionizing very quickly so that we avoid this awful thing which we've seen, for instance, in a famous project, TARDEC, for the US Army to automate military convoys, where it can take almost a decade to validate a perfectly successful technology system to be able to deploy it. The third aspect is explainability, and as a senior executive in a technology company, you'd be surprised how often my job is to prevent us using the most advanced tool for a job when a simpler, more explainable tool will do. So the explainability aspect is another thing which kills projects very near the end when, despite the numerical evidence showing that your automated system is making better decisions, because no one can interpret them, no one, and this is probably correctly, is willing to actually let it or listen to its advice. And then the final part, of course, is in a world where people have got used to distributed working in teams, different parts of the world, the collaboration tools, similar to, if you like, the data scientist artificial intelligence version of GitHub, is absolutely critical. What I'm going to do now is, before we're out of time, talk about a very interesting third area, which we in the world had not really been thinking about 2 years ago. And it is this intermediate point between what we can do to help build sort of shrink-wrapped AI systems, which can be used by the rest of the world safely, through to empowering the machine learning engineers to be able to get through as many projects as quickly as they can without getting either slowed down in development or, even worse, working really hard on a project which then gets cancelled. There's something in the middle. There is the question of, if you're running an organization with very strong technologists who you can afford to send on perhaps a multi-week training course, but you can't afford to send them back to school for 2 years, how you bring those folks along for the AI ride. And coming first out of Google Brain, we started to look at the question of what is it that a machine learning expert, human, is doing when you ask them to help with a task, such as the video asset tracking example, or autonomous navigation for large ships and so forth. What do they actually spend their time doing? And then automate that. So we have now a system which tries to do the things which a machine learning practitioner is doing when they're first getting data, cleaning it up, trying out a few experiments, seeing what works, seeing what filters to apply to a computer vision system, see how to combine information from speech and vision, all of these things, and runs algorithms to automatically try out all of those things. We've unimaginatively called it AutoML. The news which we're both excited about and a little scared about is that in the recent largest data science competition, where every year an organization called Kaggle runs a data scientist competition to build the best, most predictive model from some new data from a unpublished application area. We kind of almost as a joke submitted AutoML to compete against the what are called I think they're called the magicians of data science, the 30 people who made it to the very finals of this big international competition, and AutoML beat them all. So we suddenly discovered that the skills which we thought were unique skills that came from training for these data scientists, much of that also can be automated. So that is one of the reasons why I'm now expecting to be able to move much faster and make much better use of existing data scientists. But now, with some care, we've been running user acceptance tests on folks who are not machine learning experts to help them work with AutoML to learn how to be a data scientist while guided by this AI tutor. That's the direction we're trying to move things now. I'm going to give an example.
The main challenges facing wildlife today is habitat loss, climate change, and threats from the illegal wildlife trade. Zencel's mission is to create a world where wildlife thrives. We work in over 50 countries around the world where we empower and inform people to help stop wild animals going extinct. We have been working with Google to look at how we can use Cloud AutoML to really make a difference.
We use camera traps to monitor the state of the planet. They are tiny little digital cameras hooked up to a little motion sensor, basically. So when an animal walks past, they snap a little photo, which you can then retrieve at a later time. So as well as telling you about how abundant different species are, they can also offer behavioral insights as well.
One camera trap study generates hundreds of thousands of images. So over 6 months, you might get 500,000 images that you need to sort through and analyze.
You've got to go through every single image. You've got to label them, the time, the date, what it contained, which camera it was. At the moment, it takes months.
If we can speed up the analysis from 6 months to just days, that's revolutionary in our conservation efforts. Google Cloud AutoML allows conservationists who are non-coders use machine learning to create image recognition models to identify species in camera trap images.
These are images that I have labeled, and they're going to teach the AutoML algorithm what different species look like.
If you can just AutoML it, you could go, show me the images that are empty, show me the images that have the animal that I'm interested in. You can actually use your scientific research and conservation time to do conservation rather than doing data analysis.
We might use the data to actually influence policy change or conservation action. AI is going to play a really big part in collecting all the data together from wildlife conservation sites around the world. And if we do that in real time, we can use AutoML to really monitor the pulse of wildlife across the planet.
So that's an example of where we're trying to get to, where we are able to not have to rely on finding Red Whitaker and the artisans in order to get this machine learning stuff out there. Cloud AutoML is early stage, but it's one of the big things we're pushing on now. And I think you can expect to see increasing automation, not only in all the application areas of things throughout the Air Force organization, but do expect that there will be accelerations in the pace of actually helping people do these things. It's not going to stay the same velocity. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. At this point, Mr. Marion will now present you a small token of our appreciation.
Right. Well, we talked about a little bit about the lower half of the stack, but ultimately this is the icing on the cake, right? And this was done intentionally about where we're going with AI. This is great information as we lead into 2020 as the year of AI with the Air Force. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Next up will be the ITAS panel, followed by breakout sessions, after which we will be taking lunch. Please be back in your seats at 11:55 for our next keynote speaker, Lieutenant General Vera Lynn Jameson, Deputy Chief of Staff of Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance, and Cyber Effects Operations. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, you're released for a 10-minute break. Thank you.
They should be coming down right now. We're here.
Let it go.
What's that?
Let it go.
Be like if we were right down there. Look it open.
Yeah. Hey, sir, how are you? What's the configuration?
Sensor, every weapon, every shooter, every platform is connected together in ways that allows unlimited number of options for warriors to be able to execute. To me, is the opportunity we've been given. And if we can do that with our allies and partners who we're here side by side with at Air University, we're going to be unstoppable in future conflict. But those are the formations that are formed here at Air University. And like I told the class, there's probably a future chief of staff of a country in this class. And what a blessing to be able to build that relationship now that you can build on in the future. That's Air University. I'm a believer that the journey that we're on to impeccable character is not a place we ever arrive. It's a journey that we're all on. And everything that matters for the service that is entrusted with the most destructive weaponry on the planet, the nation has every right to expect us to be men and women of impeccable character. They also entrust to us the greatest treasure in our arsenal, which is the young men and women who hold up their right hand and swear an oath to defend the country. And it's our job to take care of them. So I try to emphasize to all of the officers especially to remind them that America is in love with its United States military. It hasn't always been that way. It certainly wasn't that way for my dad coming out of Vietnam. It's that way for us today. But America is not in love with its senior officer corps, nor should it be. It actually expects us to take care of their sons and daughters that they've entrusted to us. And so we have an obligation and sacred duty to perform. And part of the experience of Air University is to reconnect a little bit with the reasons that we joined, and also think a little bit about this obligation we have to properly organize, train, equip, and present these airmen who are courageously led with caring and inspirational leaders to go forward and do the nation's business and take care of their families while they're gone. That to me is a sacred duty, and I want this year at Air University to allow some reflective time for the officer corps especially to think about that. We got to make sure that we don't consider ourselves, and we don't allow others to consider us as a light switch of capability. And as I often share, as a philosophy major who took 6 years to get to the Air Force Academy, I actually don't know how these lights work. I'm pretty sure there's bulbs involved and a power source and some wires. I don't know the technical aspects of that, but my entire adult life, every time I flip the switch, lights come on. Every single time. Every time I flip the switch off, lights go off. It's magic, right? I don't know what goes into it. It just happens. We cannot let the United States Air Force be considered a light switch to both the American people, our joint teammates, and our allies and partners. We can't allow a narrative that says, hey, I don't know how I get a blue dot on my phone, 24/7, 365, every time I turn it on, it's just there. Switch. I turn it on, flip the switch, and I get GPS. How wonderful is that? No, there's actually 7 airmen today, right now, on console, 24/7, 365, who are part of a space operational squadrons that provides GPS for the planet. Not just the U.S., for the planet. We cannot be a light switch. We have got to make sure that we are meeting our responsibility to be not only a supporting component of joint warfare, but also a supported component of joint warfare. That our leaders that we raise in Air University are fully prepared to design, execute, and lead joint campaigns. That's what the nation needs, and that's what we're building here. I would tell you that instructor duty is going to be some of the most rewarding duty you will ever have in your Air Force career. It's interesting the level of understanding that you gain when you're forced to have to teach it, because there's no way for you to wing it with the wicked smart folks that are coming to this school. You got to understand it, you got to know it, and you got to articulate it in ways that challenges the thinking of the students. And so what happens in that is you actually develop a better foundation for the skills that you're teaching. I was privileged to be a first assignment instructor pilot as a young lieutenant. So I spent my first 3 years flying as an instructor in the T-38. Truth be told, when I got the assignment, I wasn't that thrilled, but I didn't know what I was getting into. And then I got into instructing, and I loved it. And what I found was that my flying skills were increasing at a pace I had never anticipated, because in order to instruct, I had to perfect.
Next up is
If I was going to show a student, especially at Shepherd, where English was a second language, if I was going to show that student, how to do it right, I had to know how to do it exactly right and teach and instruct while I was performing the maneuver. And so I found that my flying skills improved exponentially in that time that I flew as an instructor. And it set the foundation for every assignment I had after that, in terms of how you master skills quickly and then be able to articulate them in ways that can teach. So I would recommend to anyone who's considering instructor duty in the United States Air Force, do it. We need you. We need the very best. And this is our university, and we have to invest in it.
Brigadier General Chad Reddick.
Got it. Perfect.
Absolutely, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Next up is the ITAS panel, moderated by Brigadier General Chad Radke. At this time, as soon as the panel comes out, we will be starting to take questions. If you have questions for the panel or General Radke, please email AFITC@gmail.com, AFITC questions@gmail.com. Thank you.
All right.
I'll turn it over to the booth for questions.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate it. Hi. Good morning, everyone. How we doing? Okay. You're battling the rain. You're battling the uphill stream to get out on your 10-minute break and get back in your seats for what I think is going to prove a pretty exciting panel. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to help moderate this panel, but these are the experts in the center of the stage, and so I look forward to teeing them up for opening comments, but also fielding your questions. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're at a crossroads in our United States Air Force, and you've gotten to hear some pretty dynamic speakers talk about what's going on in our Air Force today. Really exciting opportunities. As we've heard, there's a real urgency that's going on right now. Yesterday, you heard from my boss, General Mike Holmes, that was talking about the user experience that, quite frankly, all of us face on a daily basis. He talked about how that user experience and the IT performance on the network that we operate today is crushing our airmen's souls. So there's an urgency right now. I will also tell you that I think that there's a huge opportunity. You got to hear from senior leaders like my boss, General Holmes, yesterday. You got to see the clip that Mr. Marion played this morning from our Chief of Staff of the Air Force, talking about the highway and how we invest in the information highway. There's an opportunity as well. The network that we have today is not going to be the network that will enable multi-domain operations in the future. And so we have got to think about the opportunity. We have got to think about the future and how do we get there in rapid fashion. So it's pretty exciting. We also have to recognize that the multi-domain operations environment of the future, one that is talking about that highway, will be enabled by a lot of the technological advances that we're seeing today. Things like artificial intelligence, machine learning that we just heard about, 5G technology, quantum computing. How do we integrate all of that in? Recognition is that our industry partners are leading the course on this. And so in a collaborative environment, we need to figure out how we take advantage of what industry is doing for the betterment of our United States Air Force. We have some urgency, we have an opportunity, and we have a plan. You got to hear Major General Skinner talk yesterday. You got to hear Mr. Marion reiterate this morning that it's very exciting right now because we have extreme alignment. We have some commander's intent. We have a vision of where we're going, and we have a workforce that is working toward aligning in a unity of effort fashion to get there. And so we're at a pretty exciting point. As such, it is really my pleasure to moderate today's panel. It is a powerhouse panel that you see before you of a mixture of Air Force leaders and industry partners. And they're going to talk about how we take the urgency that we have today and move forward into the future to that opportunity that we're looking for, to enable multi-domain operations of the future, to no longer crush the souls of our airmen that are trying to lead our Air Force. For the panel, it's going to be my privilege to quickly introduce each of the gentlemen on stage. We'll ask for a quick opening comment, and then we will advance down the line, and then more importantly, we look forward to your questions. Questions, as you have seen, will come in from the booth, and I'm going to do my best to figure out which lucky gentleman on stage gets that question. So we look forward to the discussions. Our first speaker today is no stranger to all of you. He has a very complex two hats that he holds. He is not only the Assistant Deputy Chief Information Officer for Digital Transformation, working for Mr. Marion, but he is also the Assistant Deputy Chief of Staff for Cyber Effects Operation, working for our new A26 construct. In this capacity, He is the career field functional manager for over 36,000 officer and enlisted professionals. He is also responsible for integrating Air Force, air, space, and cyber effects operations into the joint fight by working things like policy and synchronization of efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, Major General Kevin Kennedy.
All right, thank you, Chad. Thanks for joining us here today. My thoughts when Chad talked about, what is our Air Force asking for us out of this activity? What it is they know they have a sense of what they can do. And right now, their information technology isn't letting them connect what they think and know is possible with what they're being asked to accomplish on behalf of the nation. That is really about what we're trying to do. We're looking and say, okay, so how do we approach this in a different model, take advantage of what industry is fielding right now to make their lines of effort successful, and say, how do we do this inside the Department of Defense? And it truly is an inside the Department of Defense effort. You heard from Mr. Marion, the Army has come along with us, and if the Army and the Air Force can partner together, we can turn the entire department. The Navy's watching, the Marine Corps is watching. They have their own thoughts, and they are hopeful that what will come out of our activities, they can quickly partner and we can move out. So what's the challenge that we see, that I see as we're moving out on this path, is it's not technology, it's not the people, it's the policy. The policy is going to be what is going to be our challenge of how we work through doing things differently in a structure, in a security model that we are going to be comfortable executing. And we've heard a little talk today about some of the future technologies, some of the future capabilities and approaches, Zero Trust Network being one of those. That is truly, how do we turn the Department of Defense in a way that enables us to take advantage of what we're seeing in commercial and really change the way our policies are aligned. Some of them from, some are in law, so we have to work on changing that. Some are in just Department of Defense policies, some are in Air Force policies, some are in the ways that other parts of the department do business. Everyone has a mission, they are accomplishing it in their own manner. So the question becomes, as we use information technology, how do we move away from, and I had a conversation yesterday, and I think this is a really good way to think about it, is how do you move away from what doesn't need to be bespoke, which I had to go look up. But what it means, what I thought is, why are we writing in these very specific capabilities for information technology for a strategic attack enterprise, an ISR enterprise, and a C2 enterprise? Why does this app have to be that specific to this one or two or maybe community of 100 if we can make it in a way that it can be agile enough in its development and in its capabilities that it meets the needs of the user, but we can do it in a way that takes advantage of what's already commercial off the shelf? Thinking from the app all the way up into how we do networking. So that is really where I've asked the team is like, okay, identify those policies, and that's our job on the air staff, is to work with the department and figure out how do we have to break those down and move and go faster. Because as we move out in the risk reduction effort, that is going to be our challenge as we try to do something different. The status quo will reach out and try and pull us back to center. And we're going to have to keep pushing on that if we're going to get the value that we want and we're going to get the information technology that really is supportive of our warfighting missions. Thanks, Chad.
Great. Thanks, General Kennedy. Ladies and gentlemen, our second speaker today is the Program Executive Officer for Command, Control, Communications, Intelligence, and Networks stationed at Hanscom Air Force Base in Massachusetts. His capacity and his portfolio consists of 2,600 personnel and is the acquisition executive for a $12.1 billion portfolio that develops, produces, deploys, and sustains our Air Force joint and coalition cyberspace networks, cryptologics, and data link systems and special projects to enable combat operations. Ladies and gentlemen, Major General Michael Schmidt.
Thanks everyone for being here, and I appreciate Chad, you hosting us here on this panel. Thank you very much. I'll just say I am not a core IT person. This is my fourth PEO job. I'm more of my experience in acquisitions, more fighter bomber weapons, special operations. I'm really excited to be here. I honestly never thought I would be so excited until I realized where we're going, and with the help of Mr. Marion, we have the alignment is something that that I don't think we've ever seen before in the Air Force. I was definitely the biggest whiner of IT when I came into this job, and you know, I'm very proud to be here. I'm proud of the progress that we're making. Enterprise IT as a service is so exciting, and I'm looking forward to hearing you guys ask really hard questions of the industry folks on our sides during this panel. But it is really exciting. The connection to Cloud One is really exciting, and I'm, you know, I love our business systems, but I love the fact that we're talking about integrating all of our weapon systems into Cloud One. The slide that Mr. Marion showed on DevSecOps and moving that environment into Cloud One is such a transformational step for the Air Force, and with the help of a lot of experts, we're really making a lot of progress there, and the momentum is tremendous. One of the things I'm most excited about is more of an organizational construct, and that's the integration of the functional management office and the program office. So I love the fact that Colonel King and Colonel Uppel are sitting right next to each other right there. That is the integrated program office under their leadership. So think Air Combat Command, the program office, SAF-CN, and now the Army joining the team as well. A recent addition of an awesome new lieutenant colonel from the Army in the program, in the integrated program office there. So that is super exciting, seeing this team get after this as an Air Force, and not just thinking about IT as delivering email to your computer, but the full integration of data within the Air Force, and our ability to take that data and really do something with it, and combine that with where the chief's trying to go in multi-domain operations, ABMS. I spent a lot of time with Preston Dunlap on the ABMS side of things, and we're finally starting to make the real connection between the future of IT infrastructure and the rest of our programs in the Air Force, and not forgetting at all about the classified side of our Air Force. Having all of that wrapped together is really exciting, and we're just getting started, and we don't have all the answers, but I know we're on the right path right now, so it's an exciting time for all of us in the Air Force. Thanks, Chad.
Great, thanks, sir, appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, our third panelist is the Senior Director for Air Force Programs at Microsoft. In this capacity, he and his team are responsible for delivering transformational capabilities to the United States Air Force. Year after year, he has successfully delivered upon these solutions, which has allowed our federal government to effectively leverage technology to meet its mission. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rob Wallace.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here, and appreciate everybody attending. I think one of the things that, as the industry has transformed, Microsoft, no different than any other large organization, has been forced to transform. And when we transitioned CEOs a couple years ago, we looked at how we were running our networks, and everybody was a special unicorn. If you look at Microsoft line of business, the Xbox division had to meet their individual network requirements. We were coming online with, at the time, a product called BPOS, now Office 365. They had to have their own special, unique network requirements. Our Azure business had to have their own unique requirements, MSN, and then you get into the additional lines of business that operate and meet with enterprise customers, and that was their own unique set of requirements. And so what we looked at is how can we consolidate that, and we did that by eliminating the multi-networks and realized that everybody had a special mission to meet their particular customer set. And so what Microsoft now is bringing to the market is what we've learned to implement commercially inside the company, and that is a solution that becomes really land agnostic and is a truly innovative capability. Our experience is we want to improve end user support, end user satisfaction, and I think that marries up with where the Air Force is headed, is improving that end user experience. We want customers to get from their edge, their endpoint, to our cloud services in the most efficient, effective way possible so that the user experience is a positive one. And I think that's where we've brought our network to the Air Force to help transform that, to improve that experience. We also know that there's going to be other clouds that you're going to get to through our network. We deliver that. We meet with the other cloud providers at a network level on a weekly basis. And so there is good integration and collaboration across the different vendors that bring that to the Air Force. So we're excited to be part of the risk reduction effort. We continue to learn as alongside the other industry partners in the Air Force. And so it's a great opportunity, and just appreciate that.
Great. Thanks, Rob. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, our fourth speaker is AT&T's client executive and vice president. He aims in this capacity to modernize and accelerate air, space, and strategic defense, enterprise, and mission capabilities by delivering world-class global and innovative solutions using the network as a platform. Additionally, he is a 25-year graduate of our United States Air Force, retiring in the rank of colonel. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Lance Spencer.
Thanks, General Radke, and thanks everybody for being here. I was reflecting back that at this time last year, we were in the middle of our negotiations. You remember that, Rob? You were in the same boat.
Very well.
And we were basically living at Hanscom Air Force Base, and it's been a busy year since then. I'll say a big credit to the Air Force on how they're approaching this. Starting with the OTA vehicle, it allowed not only a rapid acquisition, but it has allowed us to really collaborate with the Air Force and across the panelists up here with both our Air Force facing our commercial experience to be able to bring best of breed capability that's coming to the Air Force. So I think that's been fantastic. One of the things I encounter when I'm out talking at the bases we're supporting and the Air Force in general is maybe a misunderstanding between consumer and commercial. So we're bringing a commercial capability, which is what we bring to the Fortune 1000, global businesses, things like that. Consumer is dirty internet. You get it from the local stores and stuff like that. But commercial is a really robust mission grade kind of network capability that we're bringing. So there really is a difference, not only in the robustness, the cybersecurity, but also the performance. And it's often cited, just the commercial experience, how good that is, or the consumer experience, how good it is. The commercial experience is even better and more robust. There's been a lot of mutual learning the last year. General Kennedy mentioned, the policies that we've had to encounter. Microsoft and AT&T were the first OTAs to announce, so we've been kind of trailblazing, encountering things and having to work through it with the Air Force. The Air Force has been hugely responsive in helping us overcome barriers and hurdles and move out on things. The interim authority to test that was signed a few months ago opened the doors and paved the way for us to start connecting capability. And while we don't have actual users connected yet, which we're going to do in the fourth quarter of this year, Friday night we actually connected Buckley's network to the AT&T network. So we're actually actively pinging devices. We have visibility, and maybe that's the first time for the Air Force to have a commercial network be able to touch Air Force devices. So those are major steps to move through. It's important, I think, as we're moving out. If this was a pure commercial delivery, we'd probably be going faster, and typically we do. But one of the things that's really important in delivering to the Air Force is understanding the mission, and so balancing the speed of delivery with mission assurance and not disrupting mission activities has been really important. And working with the bases, working with the IPO, working with the Air Force in general, it's been fantastic to have that collaboration as we work through it. One of the big things we've also done this year is standing up. We've got our global delivery ecosystem that we deliver AT&T services through. Working with the Air Force has required an extra touch point to make that work. So we've established that. We've got our network operations and security operations centers up and running. So when we're seeing the devices at Buckley, for example, now, we're doing it through that ecosystem. So that'll give the extra assurance that the Air Force needs also to have the resiliency and the robustness that they need going forward. So thank you again, General Radke and panelists. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, our fifth panelist is the Group Vice President for Defense and Intelligence for Unisys. In this capacity, he is responsible for delivering solutions including application modernization, cybersecurity, and data center and infrastructure services for Unisys clients in our Department of Defense and the intelligence community. In addition, he is a veteran of the United States Air Force, serving in uniform for 6 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Andrew Boyd.
Thanks for allowing me to be on the panel. I'm going to tell you how we're bringing commercial capability to the Air Force through the eyes of an airman, if I can. Today, we perform discovery throughout the summer with the Air Force. And today, the user or the airman or the civilian will come to their computer, and it'll take about 15 to 20 minutes to boot up on their computer. So they'll go get a cup of coffee and come back, and hopefully it's done. And if they want to perform a task, let's say they want to order a device or they want new accesses, they'll go to a virtual environment, self-help knowledge articles, and if they don't have what they find there, then they find touch labor somewhere on the base. And so this can be a time-consuming effort. As they look to obtain a device, they have to either go to their management or the local IT team to find the device in the asset management and to get approvals. They have a limited selection of devices, and so that takes time. And so that's not how they deal with IT today. The management team who wants to provide them the device, once a new airman comes on board, it takes them a minimum of 2 weeks to find a device, set up the accounts that they need. And then if they want to track the asset, they go to one system. If they want a project planks or building out a whole new office like we are at Hanscom, they have to go into yet another tool. So it's not a very integrated picture, time consuming. And when they check on the status of their devices, they keep calling back time and time again. That IT doesn't have to be that way. So the airmen of the future, starting in the first quarter of fiscal year 2020, here's how it's going to look. An airman's going to come in, their laptop or their desktop's going to boot up in a minute or less. If they have an issue, if they want to order a device, they're going to go to a service catalog. We're using ServiceNow. But they're going to go to a service catalog that's integrated, and they're going to see an array of devices they have access to them based on the role or persona that they have within the environment. And so you'll see Apple products, you'll see Droid-based products, you'll see laptops, you'll see a number of companies and brands providing those products. And so they can then make a selection, and through their personas, the management team's already through rule-based approved them to get the products that they're looking for. Their products comes in the course of hours to days, maybe up to 2 days. And so we're trying to go deliver devices from weeks to months down to hours to days. And so that's our objective. We perform this across Fortune 50 companies, global companies, but also within the Army, DOE, DFAS, and other environments within the DoD too. The management team, when they want to find out what the status of their IT request is or their access is, they go to a real-time IT dashboard. They can find where it is, kind of like pizza delivery or FedEx package. So they don't have to keep calling back to the service agents, and they don't have to call back because they already know the status. That actually reduces your cost through that type of IT dashboard. But furthermore, something that you'll see starting in the October timeframe, you'll see a live chat function, just like you've seen in the commercial world. And then starting in the December timeframe, January timeframe, you're going to start to see chatbots come. You're going to see AI and ML used to automate some of your service requests. So instead of waiting on a human doing it, it's automated. You get an automated response within minutes. And so your responsiveness increases. And so that's an exciting place to be. We've reduced the risk of this type of delivery through hundreds of commercial companies, again, across the globe, Fortune 50 within the Army. So we're highly confident in delivering these services this fall. The first page you'll see AT&T's plugged in Buckley. You actually see touch labor from Unisys on Buckley in the September timeframe, but then we go fully operational in the October-November timeframe, and then you'll see ensuing bases, Maxwell Gunter's one here in town, Offutt, and a number of others throughout the U.S., and then Spangdahlem in Germany. The men and women are getting trained right now. at the service desk. They're excited. A lot of them are veterans coming out of Fort Gordon and in the Utah area, and then military, active duty military spouses are training up too. And the interesting feature there is they can take their job with them as the active duty member of PCSs. So it's some exciting features. We're bringing commercial support, but de-risk for the DoD. So we're excited.
Great, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our final panelist this morning is the Managing Director for Accenture Federal Services. In this capacity, he has held various technology and program leadership positions supporting defense and intelligence clients with complex systems, integrating and delivering programs. He has an extensive IT background in strategy, advisory services, technology architecture, application development, biometric technologies, service management, and cybersecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Darrell Brown.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be here today. From the standpoint of Accenture, we are the last to join. We're the fast follower around the awards here. We've been on about 2 months now. So our charge, our charge here has been to bring in the commercial best practice around cloud compute and storage. So we are reaching back into our global network and our methodologies and our tool sets to bring the best of breed to really relieve some of the pressures, some of the issues we've seen from the end user services perspective of how an airman works today and the challenges they have. So we are really excited about bringing our compute platforms that we can expose to the end users, also to help to migrate out your applications from the bases as part of this experiment for a best fit, cloud best fit feel. So that we are working through the process of customizing your experience, making sure your data and applications are viewable at a macro level for your leadership, looking at ways to where we can efficiently show how you're using consumption and reporting back on that. So metrics and feedback is really key for us to make sure that we are creating those solutions for the team here to see how this experiment runs at a macro level. Some key parts of our swim lane here are, we have teams going out to bases doing application and infrastructure level assessments, going in really door to door and looking for what you have on bases and how we can rationalize that, whether it's a fit for cloud migration into a public cloud provider, or is it something we keep on-prem in a more of a hyper-converged state that we manage. So you'll see those resources coming around the next few months. We have 4 teams out right now at 4 bases, and we will have kickoffs for the final 3 this month, so in September. So next part of that is really to have a flexible compute platform for the experiment, really focused on base level applications, so that we're providing really a well dynamic and flexible footprint for any future need, really to get to the point of exposing cloud native services for things such as AI, machine learning, NLP, big data and analytics for things you may not know you need yet, but for things your app owners really are asking for. And then finally, we have an innovation swim lane where we're going through and really being pushed by the FMO and PMO to bring our commercial best practices, what we're seeing both within the U.S. and globally, as to what could be used at the Air Force to really fix your missions going forward. So whether that's a cloud management platform, whether that's getting into advanced analytics and big data, getting into, there was one other one, but the CMP, big data analytics, and then it doesn't matter. But the key for that is it's an area for where we can quickly adapt in a commercial space to pull in any of the latest and greatest technologies where we think it will fit your mission. So we're working closely with both the FMO and PMO, and that's something we can adapt to and spin to pivot as needed. So we are happy to be here, part of this team. We look forward to working with all the panelists, and we'll move forward in that direction. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the comments. Gentlemen, appreciate the opening comments. This is an exciting period for the United States Air Force. You saw a pictorial map yesterday when General Holmes had his presentation, where he showed those 6 risk reduction bases that are going through this initial tranche of enterprise IT as a service. The team that you have assembled on stage is the team that is coming together in unity of effort to advance this forward. You have the vision, the intent, and the policy from General Kennedy at the Pentagon. You have the acquisition professionals and managers from Hanscom in General Schmidt. You have Microsoft and AT&T that are part of the network as a service. You have Unisys that's part of the end user services, and Accenture is coming online with compute and store. So this is the team that's rolling that out to the 6 bases across our United States Air Force that will inform us of the way that we need to move forward. We talked about the urgency. We talked about the huge opportunity that we have to get after this thing called multi-domain operations and have the network that we need in the future. So with that, we have about 20 minutes of questions, and hopefully you have been sending them in to the Gmail account, and we look forward to the voice from the booth.
Good morning, General Radke, panel. We've received quite a few really great questions from the booth. Here's your first one. What lessons has the Air Force taken from the Navy's efforts with the Navy Marine Corps Internet and their experience with IT as a service?
That sounds like a great policy question for General Kennedy. Sir.
Thanks, Chad. Before I answer the question, there's also that this is a triangle on the Air Force side, and General Radke does lead a large portion of how we're executing this. So whenever we have any type of enterprise discussion, it really is a lead command, air staff, and program office type of activity. NMCI. So the bottom line is we sat down aggressively with them to understand of how we have, because as I travel around the department and talk with folks that have been on MCI, there are some lessons that they felt learned. And the tagline that I use and I borrow from the boss is, if we get to the end of this and we're just taking our approach, we're just taking our equipment and we're handing it to someone else and paying them to do the same thing, and we think we're going to pay them less to do that, then we're essentially just outsourcing our mess for less, and we'll get the results you would expect. Okay, so that's the one thing, is as we're looking through this, is we're trying to do this in a new approach. The other part is that when NMCI, when they thought through the acquisition of how they did that, the OTA, this is, and I'll probably toss this over to Gunny a little bit, a lot of the lessons that we learn in this RE is how do we do the acquisition in a way that doesn't become a purely transactional type of activity. And what I mean by that is, if you see us, we're all sitting here together talking about how we're going to work together to produce this enterprise for our airmen. This is a partnership. Admittedly, there is a customer-client type of activity here, but it's still, if we're not working together and understanding the policies and willing to have some frank conversations that we might not have had in a previous type of acquisition, then we're not going to get that type of result, and we'll end up places where we will be looking at terms and conditions rather than outcomes. And really, that's what we're looking at as we're going forward. The other part, too, is when we're talking about the infrastructure, we're thinking about what we transfer, how we would transfer it back, because we're not necessarily burning the bridge on every part of the service catalog as we're going through this. And so as we're working with our industry partners, it's like, okay, we think this is the solution. We think this is the approach. But if we have to do a different in the end, we don't want to be in a position that we have off-boarded risk in ways that then makes it untenable to bring it back to a different model. So as we're looking through that, we are trying to learn the lessons of NMCI, and we talked down, and I sat down with several senior leaders from the Navy as we stepped into this activity to make sure that we didn't go down the same road, except where they had good outcomes.
Great, thank you, sir. General Schmidt, anything from the acquisition side?
Yeah, so from the beginning, we obviously wanted to get to the best in the commercial industry. But we didn't just go out and pick these guys. We had a very competitive process, different than a normal source selection, but a very competitive process. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about that. We got a lot of lessons learned from some things DIUX was doing, good and maybe not as good, but we definitely got a lot of lessons learned. I was really excited about the competitive process, and Bobby's team, supplemented by SAF-CN and ACC, spent weeks at a time sequestered going through source selection-like processes to ultimately select these folks. One of the key tenets of this whole risk reduction effort and any follow-on effort are the government is not going to give up the right to the hardware if a contractor isn't performing and has to walk away or chooses to walk away. We have to keep the hardware, and we own all the data. And those are things that we had to work out with these companies. The beautiful part of an OTA is you can have this interaction at the table and kind of figure it out as you go, which is really important for a risk reduction effort kind of thing. But our plan is to remain in a competitive environment going forward. We're under the risk reduction effort, we're allowed to do up to 20 bases, but ultimately we have about 200 bases that the Air Force needs to get after, and that's a monumental effort that we're looking to partner with industry to go do. So I know I had some questions here and there about how did you just pick these companies? We didn't just pick them. We really solicited from the best in the commercial industry. Again, we really wanted to get the best commercial practices, but we sequestered a team over and over again. Last 4th of July was missed by Bobby's entire team. Anyways, I'd be happy to talk more on that to the side, but it was an exciting acquisition process to get to where we got with these great industry partners from my perspective, and something completely new to me, which was great.
Great. Thanks, sir. Next question, please.
Next question. How do you envision the user experience really changing for the average user?
Great question. Let's do rapid fire if we can hear from each of our industry partners. Lance, we'll start with you, please.
So first of all, the network will be up. And I say that with credibility. We have 3.5 million business customers, and if our network wasn't up, we'd be out of business. So that will be good. I think also the change management process will be much more agile, much faster. Typical ASIs we're going through right now are about 21 days. Our standard's about 3, and very often it's not even service interrupting when we go through the process. It's just with caution. So those are just a couple examples, I think.
Perfect. Thanks.
I think we'll provide an abstraction layer. So from a compute and store perspective, we all have to come together to do an end-to-end transaction, but we want to make sure we're abstracting the environmental question marks and challenges from the end user, from the application owner. So I think you're going to see hopefully more simplified experience and level of effort for someone on that network.
Great. Thank you.
I think what we're open to bring is, like I mentioned in my opening remarks, is that end user experience, that cloud experience, whether it's Office 365 or an application that's sitting out there, there is a seamless way to get from point A to point B. And so what we really want to do is eliminate those barriers that come in between there. A lot of times what we are learning as we are going through our assessments at the base level, what we learn through the OTA process about the network is there are some things that you can possibly eliminate. Some of those things are there for policy. Some of those policies are very good policies. Some of those maybe are for a non-cloud world. And so we are hoping to increase that speed from point A to point B and get that cloud user experience to be much more positive than it is today. We know that you've got some challenges with the network getting to things like Office 365, and we want to make that user experience much better.
So expect high-speed, low drag. So faster response times in case you need it, in case that you need a device. If you have an issue, faster response times, higher rates of resolution upon first call, and then expect a higher level of quality of service across the bases that's more consistent that you'd expect that the Air Force deserves.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Next question, please.
A number of senior leaders are concerned ITAS is not moving fast enough. Based on what you've learned so far, what are the challenges in accelerating to ITAS at various bases, and what are you doing to overcome those challenges?
General Schmidt, from an acquisition perspective, are there any challenges to going faster?
So there are a lot of challenges. Well, there's a balance, right? So there's a lot of discussions on risk. Who's going to approve it? When are we going to approve it? What's the rate at which we want to go? How much of the risk reduction effort do we need to have done before we make a bigger decision on the rest of the Air Force? Certainly, this isn't just an acquisition discussion. It is a ACC discussion. It's a SAF-CN discussion. It's a NSA Cybercom discussion. So there's a lot there. And there's a financial discussion as well, right? You know, we're in a good place IT-wise. I think, as Mr. Marion mentioned, probably the best I've ever seen in the Air Force in my time in the Air Force, at least with the commitment from the top down to funding our IT programs. But at the same time, it is a lot of money. And there is a little, maybe a little tension behind, why don't we just go do it for the whole Air Force versus how much do we want to learn so we do it right? And I don't think there's a right answer there. It is a constant discussion that we have on a regular basis, a really good discussion. And there might be a different answer on the network as a service side than there is on the end user services side than there is on the compute and store side. There are all of those questions are different in each of those buckets. And so I don't know that we'll necessarily move forward with everything at one time. We're still working through that. We're still working through the broader acquisition strategy. But, you know, our team is ready to go as fast, I think, as the Air Force wants it to go. And then at the same time, we're having some of these really, really good, challenging discussions about risk versus, yeah, but my airman's readiness needs to get improved this afternoon. And those are all true things. So.
Great, thanks, sir. Rob Wallace, I'm gonna tee you up as well. From a vendor perspective, Microsoft has been involved from the beginning with 3 of our network as a service bases. From a vendor perspective and industry, have there been any challenges for you from an implementation side?
Yeah, I think as we go through and we learn, you know, we took a slightly different approach. We wanted to come in and do assessments and then make recommendations based on what our findings were from our team. And so I think, you know, one of the things that we are learning is it's no different than in that large organization. I think you have a lot of opinions and you get a lot of feedback, and trying to fight through the feedback to kind of to see what's the real impact going to be of those changes and making sure that's in lockstep. So I think some of there's just a lot of folks in the room, and sometimes that's good, and sometimes we need to consolidate that. And I think we've worked pretty well with the program team to try to work through those challenges. But I think that's no different than working with any other large organization, whether it be the Air Force, Microsoft, or some of the other large organizations up here.
Great, thank you. Next question, please.
With so many senior leaders aggressively demanding change and improvement in user experience and modernization, why is policy seen as the biggest challenge?
So I'm going to ask the policy question to General Kennedy, but I'm also going to ask. We'll go with Lance Spencer. We'll go with General Kennedy first, and then Lance, we'll have you talk about policy as well.
Okay. If you think about what we're trying to do, there's a couple of areas that the policy is come up. The one is the approach to security and how we're looking at transitioning from a primarily boundary defense model to one that has more of an active interior defense and more of a dynamic response and an agile model of how you do security and how you move the focus from the boundary to the information and the users that have access to that. That sounds great, right? Perfect. How do you execute that? And then how do you get the senior leaders across the department and our folks on our board of directors comfortable with that we are taking care of the information that is held in the Department of Defense? The other concern that you have is before, even though it's unclassified information that we're largely talking about, when you had operational security concerns, you weren't, the aggregation problem that an adversary might have was not insignificant for them to give insights and understand what you were trying to accomplish. But now with the tools that Dr. Moore was talking about in a previous presentation that are available, You can now take unclassified information and aggregate in ways that make some interesting insights. And you can find out, and aggregation is a real concern for the department as we see a lot of our intellectual property from the nation and a lot of our operational procedures from the department being exfiltrated through unclassified information. So that's the space that we're driving into, where a lot of the department is uncomfortable that we are not controlling our information and that it is being out in the wild. At the same time, the United States Air Force say, hey, we need to do this differently because we can't accomplish the mission to the level and degree that's necessary to compete and win. Bottom line, we can't. And so that is the tension of the policy that we have to work through as far as security level and understanding of where we're level setting that, because it's not just the Department of the Air Force, it is the Department of the Defense that we're impacting with how we're going to treat our information on our portion of the DODIT. So that's why that policy challenge is when we're looking about security. The other part is our workforce. And if you think about how our workforce is going to be leveraged as ITAS transforms the workforce and what they're focused on, there's some policies that we need to work through about how that workforce is trained and how we employ that workforce and how we procure things as a service, which is a change and a transformation of how we do information technology. So there are policies in there that will force us to go slower than we want as we move out on that, and those are the two big things. There's not a lack of interest in getting to it. It's a discussion that the senior leaders outside of the Air Force that have those responsibilities, we have to get them comfortable to a place where they think the security risk level that we're setting makes sense given the mission we're trying to accomplish.
Great, thanks, sir. Lance, anything to add from your perspective in industry?
So first of all, I'm glad that I haven't encountered a policy that I wrote yet that I have to try to overturn. The Air Force delivers capabilities at scale globally, as do the companies up here on stage. And a lot of the problems we've had to solve as cyber threats, as processes and policies have come in place, we've had to solve a lot of the same problems, but we've solved them differently. So for us to deliver our services at scale and bring that true commercial capability, we don't want to tailor or modify it any more than we have to, because that helps us get the cost point, helps us get the performance, helps us get the service assurance and all those kinds of things that we can pull through from the larger AT&T delivery. There's going to have to be some differences. Every delivery is different. For example, Department of Justice is one of our big clients. That's also a national security mission. And they have policies that we have to work through also with them. Today, right now, at this moment, our Chief Security Office has our expert up there at Hanscom going through how we do cybersecurity on the global AT&T network and exposing that to the Air Force. So the Air Force understands that our commercial equivalency satisfies what the Air Force needs, but it's different. So it's really that shared collaboration of understanding what we bring and how we go about doing it, make sure it meets what the Air Force intends to accomplish with the policies that are in place, and how do we move forward from there. So I think it's been great that we've had the OTA in place to help us work through those things.
Great, thank you. Do we have another question?
The 24th Air Force Commander mentioned how we have a problem with orchestration when trying to maintain and protect our networks. How are each of the vendors aligning to provide services from the edge to cloud in regards to the ITAS program?
Okay, so I think that was for all the vendors, but I'm going to ask Andrew and Daryl if you'll take a stab at this question, please.
Happy to. So while we're sticking out each of our own systems and protecting our environments, inevitably we're going to have to respond to events. And each of the vendors has a SOC, a Security Operations Center, if you will, stood up within their element. But what we'll all do is we'll report it into a system of record that's held by the end user services. Then we'll report that up to, depending on the event, to either the Air Force, DoD cert, or US cert. And we just worked through that over the last, 3 months together. Our teams worked through that with the Air Force. And so we have this federated system that is centralized and comes together to report upward. But through a mix of reporting and then protecting our environments, that's how we respond to the security. On end user services, one of the things that we're using is to harden our system. We're using microsegmentation tools in addition to the STIGs so the traffic can't be seen, using one of our own internal products called Stealth. And I know that each of my fellow teammates are doing something very similar.
Yeah, and to tack on that, so it's really, in my mind, it's a process and tooling discussion. So, making sure that we as partners are all in that same change process, the incident response process, using that tooling, as Andrew said. I think also is looking forward to the possibles. Where can we start implementing automation to resolve issues, incidents, versus having manual activities? So that's where we're going to go over the next few steps, as to how can we lean in really and become more automated in that nature.
Great, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, based on time, I'm going to cut the booth off and say no more questions. But if you'll recognize this team on the stage that's helping advance things, unity of effort for our entire United States Air Force. All right.
Uh-oh. All right. This is your ITAS team. Please capture them out in the vendors or anywhere around this week. Great panel. And can't thank you enough. Appreciate the hard work you're doing to bring our Air Force to the next century. Thank you much.
Oh, thanks, sir. Enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure meeting you.